let's get started. I'd like to have this meeting done before midnight, so. All right, this public regular meeting of the Board of Education for December 3rd, 2024 is called to order. All items being considered this evening are posted on the PPS website under the Board and Meetings tab. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on Channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the week, the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for being here this evening. Before we get started, I want to share a few housekeeping reminders. Just make sure to keep the aisles clear and keep your signs below the person behind you. All right. The first item on the agenda is the board member declaration to be considered for board leadership. In May of 2021, board adopted a process by which board members would be considered for board leadership positions. The resolution states that in order to be considered for a leadership position, board members must notify the board manager in writing by December 1st that they plan to run for the board leadership in the December election. I'm just reading really fast because it's a lot of words. Then at the first board meeting in December, which is tonight, the board chair will publicly confirm board members who are interested in serving in leadership. Senior board manager Powell has informed the board that both vice chair DePass and I would like to continue in our current roles, and no other members have expressed interest. This item will be on the January 7th board meeting agenda. Superintendent's report. Dr. Armstrong, Superintendent Armstrong, would you like to give your report?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, and I think we're queuing up the slides as my computer is not working. Welcome to December. Super excited to be in more days of school. I had an exact count for you, but my notes are not working with me right now, so it feels like about 60 days, so we'll go with that. What I was hoping to talk with you, I think I shared last time that I would have a leading and learning moment, just kind of sharing little snippets from articles around the educational leadership scene. And so one of the things I just wanted to talk about is attendance. We know that regular attendance in middle school is one of the strongest predictors for success in high school. And so right now, our current attendance rate is 91% for all grades, K-12. That's super exciting. Of course, we want it to be 100%, but 91% is encouraging. In the last 30 days, it was about 90%. I know that you all like to disaggregate things by race, and so there's a little bar graph on there that shows you how those numbers are disaggregated out. And so really there was an article in the Ed Leadership the ASCD, thank you, magazine, From Absent to Engaged, and there were just a couple of key points that I just wanted to bring forward. And the impact of poor attendance. So we know that chronic absenteeism disproportionately affects students of color, students from low-income families, and students with disabilities, and of course we know that that widens opportunity gaps. We also know, as I said before with the quote, poor attendance in middle school is a strong predictor of high school dropout. And then missing school can hinder students' ability to build and maintain peer relationships. And so when you think of strategies that we're utilizing as we're leaning into improving attendance across our district, it's making sure that we continue to cultivate a welcoming and inclusive school environment, identify and addressing patterns of absenteeism early, and through data tracking, partnering with families to address attendance barriers and emphasize its importance, and then celebrate consistent attendance, and then lean into those partnerships that we already have through ResJ and other external partners, and then also health resources when that's an impact. And so there's a link to the article that on the slides, it'll be posted in the board agenda items for you to be able to browse later, but I just wanted you to know that attendance is extremely important. We know that Governor Kotek and Dr. Charlene Williams from ODE has a campaign where it's Every Day Matters, I believe is the campaign name, and that we're leaning into that as well. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, of course, the 100 days of school plan. As I said, we're somewhere in the somewhere around day 60. But I just wanted to share 3 documents that I think I gave to you all a week or so ago, and it's the 3 documents that we've utilized in the community transition team planning. Just talking about the priorities. These are also uploaded. And just really talking about the key challenges and the opportunities for advancing literacy as priority 1. Priority 2, just the work that we're leading in to build trust and relationships across our city and the ways in which we're advocating at both the local and state level for the priorities that we have. And then finally, priority 3, this is the back half of the document, and what I love about this document, and again, it's accessible in our board agenda item for public view and for your access, but it shows all of our districts across Portland, and it's color-coded by facility condition. So you see there's more reds than yellows or greens, and then to the left of it are all of our sites with the population of students listed at each of those sites. So we're able to see not only, when you look at the dots, it's a year that's on there as well. So we're able to not only see the age of our facility, the condition of our facility, and the enrollment in the school in that location. And so this is data that we took to the community transition team meeting and had lots of robust conversation around just strategies that we can do to improve attendance and enrollment, specifically enrollment in our district. And so we know that with all of that, it's going to take all of us to lean into the conversation on improving our city. And as always, together we will rise. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
The 91% attendance is great. How does that compare from last year? Or is there places where we're doing better, like by grade, or any sort of disaggregated?
Yeah, no, that's great. I don't have last year's data with me. I do know that, like many other districts across the country post-pandemic, our numbers have not been where we've wanted it to be. And so we were super encouraged and excited to know that we hit the 90% threshold, and that we feel that that number is going to continue to increase as we lean into not only the state campaigns, but even our own work internally to really promote attendance in schools. And when you disaggregate it out and look at how our students are achieving and attending, there's some claims that we can make. So we know that when students are attending, they're learning. And when learning happens, achievement goes up. Thank you.
Yeah, and then my question is, what methods are we using to increase attendance within our students?
Yeah, so just going back to the previous point, so there are resources towards health, making sure that we are communicating and partnering with families where there are low numbers. Different school sites have teams working on improving attendance and recapturing kiddos and doing everything we can before the 10-day drop, before we lose students or before they decide to leave school. That they're doing everything that they can to hold on to those students, and that we're being active in that work. But I can bring back more information. My goal is each time to bring a data point and bring some supportive information from different sites on specific strategies. Yeah.
I have another question about so we've seen the reports on absenteeism. There's a difference between absenteeism and attendance. It seems like they should be opposite.
Yeah.
Equal to 100. Is that so? Can you tell me how we're tracking attendance versus? I think kids are marked absent if they're not in their seats by the time roll is taken.
Yeah, so I mean, I can have someone from schools come and speak specifically towards attendance. This data is looking at absenteeism and the percentage of our students who are attending school specifically, but let me see who I have out there. I believe Dr. Franco is going to come, or Dr. Adams, either. You guys can rock, paper, scissors for it.
Yeah, I think my question is, how are we tracking? I know what the difference is between absenteeism and
So you want it
attendance.
specifically around tracking? Yeah, thank you, Dr. Adams and Dr. Franco.
Good evening. Thank you for the question, Director Paz. As you know, schools take attendance daily, and that the rate at which students attend or not factor into our attendance rate and or a student's chronic absenteeism. If a student misses more than 10% of their time enrolled in school, they're noted as chronically absent. And so they aren't necessarily inverses of each other.
I was looking
Sure,
for
so,
the inverse number, so.
right, so I believe, don't totally quote me on this, but I believe our chronic absenteeism rate for last year was about 36%.
That's exactly right. I'm looking at this stat online, and so I was wondering what, if that's the absentee rate, then the attendance rate would be the inverse of that.
It's not.
But it's not, okay. So that's what I was curious about, how they were each calculated.
Sure, well, attendance.
So attendance is taken every day, and that gives us an absentee
Right,
rate.
it gives us the percent of students who are in school over the percent of all students who are enrolled.
Okay.
And chronic absenteeism looks at each individual student and how much time they've missed from school.
Okay. That's very clear. Thank you.
So I feel like the key difference in that is saying chronic absenteeism versus absenteeism. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for stepping up. Usually you don't see both people lose at rock, paper, scissors, but. All right, next we have the student representative report. Student Representative Kasavi, do you have a report for us?
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be here tonight. We are coming near to the end of first semester. Winter sports are just around the corner, so let's be sure we support all of our PIL athletes. Last night we had a great discussion about the bond. It was wonderful to see such a packed crowd. I'm glad the bond addresses student device replacements. As I know, many students face Chromebook problems. For example, within the first 3 weeks of school, I had to use 4 different Chromebooks due to issues. I also want to thank the superintendent and staff for their hard work ensuring the bond reflects the needs of students, staff, and our community. I received many emails today from Cleveland students regarding the change in cost for the Cleveland Modernization Project. Their concerns about the possibility of performing art programs having cuts. My request to the superintendent is that these concerns be addressed and communicated to students. Passing the bond requires the support of our entire PPS community, which includes all of you. I strongly believe in the importance of valuing student voice in decision making, especially at the district level. Oftentimes, students feel their perspectives are only used as a check in the box. We don't just want our voices to be heard, but we want our voices to be reflected in action. This brings me to my next topic. For the past 6 months, we've been working on the phone policy. We shared a survey, and the responses, students shared their understanding of their importance of an off-and-away policy during class time. However, a large majority of students expressed the strong desire to have access to devices during non-instructional times, especially during lunch. I truly hope moving forward, if we ask for student voice, we listen and use it rather than ask and ignore it. Thank you.
Thank you, Student Representative Kasavi. All right, next up on the agenda, we have student comments. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have any students signed up for comments today?
We do not.
We do not. Okay, awkward pause. Yeah, I thought we did too. Sorry, is my mic on? All right, then we'll move on to the next one. The Parent Advisory Committee, distribution of donations for staffing charter, Resolution 7007. Our first action item this evening is a resolution to authorize the Parent Advisory Committee. Superintendent Armstrong, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you. I'm happy to, Chair Wong. This past May, the board passed the district-wide advocacy and fundraising policy, which requires that a parent advisory committee be established. Tonight, we want to share with you the charter for this new committee. So we have Chief of Staff, Deborah Kafori, and Director of Strategic Partnerships, Robin Ferrone, and they're here tonight to speak to the charter.
Thank you so much. Well, Robin gets things set up. I'm Deborah Kafori, Chief of Staff, and very happy to be with you tonight. I'm going to hand it over to our experts here who will start the conversation and look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you. Thank you. I was just joining the Zoom. Okay. Technical difficulties. I can't complain because I don't know how to do any of this stuff, so. Apologies. It looks different than when you're in a regular Zoom meeting, and it's not letting me select the tab. But you do have the slide presentation in your materials, and so we will get started. And Kara or Roseanne are going to share this for people at home. So there's two parts to the presentation today. First, just kind of going over the Parent Advisory Committee for distribution of donations for staffing. And then the second part will be about the fund for PPS. So interrelated, but kind of confusing since they're kind of housed in different parts of our organization. So the next slide, we'll just kind of, as you know, so we have two separate resolutions. So we're going to go over the Parent Advisory Committee portion first. So next slide. So as you know, with the policy that was passed in May of 2024, the district-wide advocacy and fundraising policy, it established a new model for district-wide fundraising for staffing, and it alluded to a parent advisory committee that would report to the board. So this charter that we're bringing before you today is for you to vote on the resolution so that we may establish this new committee that will report to you. And as Director of Strategic Partnerships, I will be the staff leading up the group. In your packet is the charter draft for your consideration, and it will comprise 11 parents, one from each of our clusters, so each of the feeder schools and for each cluster plus multiple pathways, and then 2 students, high school students. So we have a adult application and a student application. And next slide, please. So what we're hoping is that if we can pass the charter today, that we would release the applications tomorrow. We've already begun some recruiting by informing our school administrators and our interested parents who are excited about this change. And we would hope to then close that by December 20th before the winter break, close the application period, as long as we have enough applications to review. And then the goal then is to have 2 board members work with our team to review the applications and then bring forward a recommendation to establish those committee members. Most likely that will be the January 21st work session of the board. I don't think there's enough time, as I had originally scoped this out. January 7th is too tight. We need the 2 weeks to be able to post. So that is the overview of the timeline. What we would then hope is that we could have the committee meet every week. So it would be like an intensive period in February, and then bring forth a recommendation for the board to for how those dollars would be invested. So that is kind of all that's on this part of the slide deck. We can go to the next slide and have discussion about the Parent Advisory Committee before we go on to the update about the fund for PBS, if that's agreeable.
Thank you. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 7007? You moved. Resolution authorizing the Parent Advisory Committee distribution of staffing charter. Director Bim Edwards moves and
Second.
Director DePass seconds. Is there any board discussion?
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you go back to earlier when you were talking about the schools that the makeup again?
Oh, yeah.
The
feeders, it was a little confusing. Okay.
Can you describe that one more time? I was trying to take notes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a terrible note taker. So I'm just going to ask you to just one more time because.
Yeah. So we want to have representation from across our district. So when we talk about, say for example, Roosevelt, that cluster, we're talking about PK, preschool all the way to high school. So we want representation, one member of a parent who resides and has children attending those schools. So it wouldn't be that we'd have a member from every grade level from every region, but we want to have a mix, so that we would have elementary, middle, and high school parents represented, and having one representative from each cluster. And then multiple pathways to graduation, includes our alternative schools and CBOs. So we're adding that. That's where the additional.
So the
two students as
plus
well.
2 students.
So the multiple pathways, the representative of that is going to be inclusive of our alternative schools, as well as the Rosemary Andersons, the
Yes.
other alternative schools that are our partners, but they do serve our kids, and those kids can flip-flop back and forth. They can come out of there and come back to us. So somebody from those alternative schools, we've made sure that they're going to have a voice.
Exactly.
Okay.
I have a question. Would parents of Head Start or Head Starts be eligible?
Yes, if they have been recipients of PPS Parent Fund Awards, as have multiple pathways to graduation. So I think we would probably put them in that category.
And I have another question. Do you envision, or maybe you don't envision, do you envision this parent advisory council interfacing at all with our community budget review committee?
Yeah, we did talk about how that their expertise would be helpful. The CBRC have a whole view of the budget. I'm not sure that there'll be interface in this short period, but the model for the charter is that the PAC, the Parent Advisory Committee, would continue meeting quarterly, so we could develop those kind of collaborations over time.
Yeah, I think it might be a good idea long term to have them less siloed and just at least structurally arrange for them to those two groups to interface, once a year or more if necessary. Great, thank you.
How are you getting the information out to people who might be interested?
Yeah, so we have had some meetings with our communications department. We're going to be putting it in the banner on the website, in social media, and in newsletters that come out through PPS Communications in the next few days. And then also the Fund for PPS has some extensive email lists of active parents that we have already informed them that this is before the board today, and so we think that we have some interested people, and then we've been meeting with principals as well, and so we'll be sharing that with them through our we call it admin portal, that they could either recruit from active parents in their community or include it in their Friday email to parents, whatever their choice, so that we're getting broad reach.
And then, let's go. Is the student recruitment also the same process as well? Or same advertising?
Yes, and we want to work with JJ as well, with the district student council, and see if they're interested or reaching out through other active leadership groups.
And also, I had a clarifying question. I know when we say parents, does that include guardians as well?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
So I'm super excited to see this. Thank you, Robin and Deborah. This was just a line in a policy that we talked about for 3 years, but I think it is the seed of really what's going to be the catalyst for a lot more parent engagement from across the district. So in the past, the funds were distributed. There was a formula, but there were a lot fewer people involved, and I think spreading this out and giving parents an opportunities to be leaders, to be talking to their communities about the work that's happening, I think will really strengthen the work and broaden the base of the work. So thank you for getting it started. I'm just excited to see who might join. I mean, this is how 30 years ago I got engaged as school funding for the Portland Schools Foundation at the time, which is the predecessor of the fund. So thanks for putting that together. One thing I would ask is if we get too close to like December 20th and you don't have enough applicants or you're missing some places, like let us know so that we can, because it would be a shame if we had to then wait till later to get it going. So it seems like we could help plug some holes or do some additional recruitment if we knew that we're short on in a particular area.
Yeah, I could also send an email to the board by the end of this week that you could share out through your networks as well. If you want to be more proactive, that'd be great.
Any more board questions, comments, discussion? All right, Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
All right, the board will now vote on Resolution 7007, resolution authorizing the Parent Advisory Committee distribution of staffing charter. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Student Representative Consavi, your vote is?
A strong yes.
Thank you. Resolution 7007 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with student representative Savy unofficially voting yes. All right, next up we have the voting on the operating agreement between the Fund for PPS and Portland Public Schools. Superintendent Armstrong, would you like to introduce this item?
Yeah, I know we already have the ladies at the table. I just wanted to emphasize that since 2019, we've had a strong partnership with the Fund for PPS. When we think back to how the Fund for PPS raised $1.3 million during COVID to get critical resources where we needed it, and then of course the focus on literacy, which as you know is one of my priorities. So I'm excited to have this item introduced. Team.
Great. Well, we will go back to the slides. There's just a couple slides that pull out some highlights from the 3-page report about the Fund for PPS, and then the operating agreement is attached in your packet. So the board recruitment is ongoing. We did have a couple of directors who'd been with the Fund for PPS since 2019 who left in June, and so we've replaced those. So the number of the board has not increased, but it has been growing. Do you want to say something about how we've been meeting with people?
We've been meeting with people. I'm sorry. Deborah Gafori, student staff. Robin and I have been meeting with lots of interested people in the community. As you can imagine, it's challenging to get people to join boards. Everyone is being asked to join so many boards out there, but we do know that there's excitement with the new superintendent here, and community members really do understand the importance of having a strong school district as our city is returning to life, that the two are so intertwined that you can't have a strong city without a strong school district, and a strong school district without a strong city. So we're getting a lot of interest, and we're trying to really broaden our outreach. So I would also put out to all of you, if you know folks who are really interested in getting people from a wide spectrum of backgrounds on the Fund board, if you know of anybody who's interested, you are our best spokespeople. So if you have ideas, please send them to us. Thanks.
And we also have plans underway to establish an advocacy leadership group and a fundraising leadership group. So this would be for community members, parents who want to be involved in those two distinct priority areas. So like I said, that's sort of initially getting off the ground, but we will be including in that application for the Parent Advisory Committee that people can check a box if they are interested in those as well, so that since only 11 people will be selected for the adult slots on that committee, that there could be an opportunity of, if people are interested in wanting to serve, let's use that energy and get more voices and engagement. We also, the Fund for PBS has launched social media accounts, so they're at Facebook and Instagram. I wanted to put a plug in there for tonight to follow. And we're posting every week, and there'll be ongoing updates about all of these developments that we've described here. Next slide, please.
I have a question. How large a board are you thinking of?
As our goal for how large we will go. We would like to get to a dozen people over the next year, but we have a ways to go. That's about double.
One of the things that we're really excited to do is to start this advocacy piece of the fund. We're working in close collaboration with Lisa Merrick, our Government Affairs Senior Manager, and we have heard loud and strong from Robin and I have from our meetings with parents, with community organizations, with principals and other administrators, that people are really chomping at the bit to lobby their legislators in Salem. And so we are partnering with a lot of the local parent organizations and PAT, other groups to have a strong voice in Salem and giving people a way to channel all of their energy into something that's really productive. So we will be assisting them. Obviously, there's a lot of groups out there that are already way out in front, so we're just going to be helping to coordinate those efforts. We're also going to have the opportunity to amplify some of the engagement opportunities that already exist and tell other PPS families who may not know of what the opportunities are. We're going to partner with some of our organizations to offer advocacy training sessions in mid-January to help coach parents and guardians and students who may not have the experience of talking with their elected officials. And then there is, it says on here, a potential for a large-scale rally. I think that's very likely to have at least one, if not more, large-scale rallies this spring to support increased funding. This is such a huge issue for so many people. I may have said this before here, but it's been a long time since I've seen this amount of community energy around getting more funding for our schools. And so we're going to help channel that and put it to good use and make sure our legislators hear loud and strongly how much Portland community cares about our schools.
Next slide, please. So we also wanted to announce the branding of this new district-wide fund at Champion PPS Schools. And we have posted on the Fund for PPS the way that you can, individuals and business can donate directly to that account. So that will be for staff positions that will be designated by the Parent Advisory Committee. So as you know, the Fund for PPS does fundraising that supports the district in multiple ways, like improving literacy, which Superintendent Armstrong referenced, and the Champion PPS Schools will be the way that we collect money for increasing staffing, so kind of replacing the local school foundation term. So we just wanted to put that out there as the name and the brand. And the Parent Advisory Committee will get to recommend investment of this just over $1 million that was collected from local school foundations fundraising last year. The PPS Parent Fund awards that are taken out of the local school foundation money is always 1 year behind the fundraising, and so in this current year there are PPS Parent Fund awards and local school foundation grants that principals are spending, and they know that those will be ending June 30. So the idea then is to use that $1 million to launch this new model, so we have something to all unite and see the impact of, and then continue fundraising for future years through that engagement with our community.
So the Fund for PPS could fund lots of things. The Champion is specifically staffing.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
I think that is it. Is that the last slide, Carl? Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, let's put this on the table.
So the money left over is going into Champion or Fund? Champion. Okay.
Great. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 7019, resolution approving the operating agreement between Portland Public Schools and the Fund for Portland Public Schools?
So moved. Second.
Director Brim Edwards moves and Director Holland seconds. Is there any board discussion?
I guess I would say, just say one of the incentives of applying to be on that committee is you get to help distribute, decide how to distribute $1 million, right? Okay, so a board person can't do it. So I have a couple questions, but I guess I'm going to just start with, it's great to see the kickoff of the district-wide fundraising. It was fun this morning to get in my inbox a Giving Tuesday from the fund. It's one with many others, but it's like, it's a sign that you're like in the game. Like that's a key moment for people like, okay, it's Giving Tuesday, who am I going to give to? So it's great to see that. I also want to just share my appreciation for the beefing up the advocacy piece, because in some ways time and effort spent there actually yields in some ways a much bigger return than fundraising a small amount of money that we're then going to distribute among 80 schools, but having an advocacy strategy actually can leverage hundreds of millions. I'm just having a throwback moment when I'm looking at Deborah, because like 25 years ago I was lobbying her as the House Minority Leader for more money for schools. So some things don't change. Also, one of the things on the advocacy and fundraising that wasn't specifically called out, but just want to put it out there and just get the affirmative that would include our local options and our bonds, not just the financial support, but also potentially activating the advocates, not only to Salem, but also here in our community. Is that contemplated?
Yes, thank you for that question and comment, Director Brim Edwards. In fact, as you know, the precursor of the fund was begun from the 1995 Portland School Bond campaign that I worked on. That's how the initial group got started that turned into the Portland Schools Foundation. So it all comes back around full circle, but supporting all of the work of PPS, but and in particular our bonds and levies, is an important piece of the work that the fund does.
So I want to share my appreciation for having that be a key pillar of the work. When the 1995 bond happened, there was a March for the Schools, and the Portland Schools Foundation started, and it really was primarily focused on sort of external advocacy, and the raising money at the schools and local schools foundation was sort of a side thing. And the Portland Schools Foundation was always very supportive of our local options, our bond, the local income tax surcharge, every variation of thing we had out that we put out over a 15-year period as we were adjusting to Measure 5. And then when the shift happened, it went from the Portland Schools Foundation to All Hands Raised, they decided that they weren't going to help anymore, and it was a huge loss. It was like a leg of the stool was gone that had been really important. So I think this is going to really strengthen our community and our advocacy and what we can do for our kids district-wide by having it back and having the focus on PPS and not have it sort of something that is very diffuse and also that doesn't support us in ways in which we can leverage the most money. So I appreciate. I had one question just to make sure that I clarify, because actually this agenda item is a rather dry legal document. Just to make sure I understand, one of the key changes is that it's more of a service agreement. So instead of having district staff running the fund, the fund will be securing services from the district staff. Is that, I'm looking at you because it's a legal document. Or
would you like me to answer that, or would you like to? Yes, correct. It's more of a services agreement because it's a 501c3 that operates more independently, and so the relationship is an appropriate one between a separate entity. Not that Deborah is separate, but the entity is separate, and the funds will flow and the services will be provided from the district.
Great. And again, just a clarification. So district staff won't be on the board. They'll be is a contract, supporting contractual relationship, is that the characterization? Other than ex officio, which,
Yeah, so in the bylaws for the fund for PPS, it does have the superintendent and a representative from the Board of Education as ex officio members. And that staff may not be on the board. In the previous model, we did have the former Chief of Staff, Jonathan Garcia, was the president of the Fund for PPS. So that is no longer in the operating agreement. That's the other change. And we'll be moving towards having hiring, if they're like through fundraising of the Fund for PPS, would pay for an executive director. So we're in sort of a transition time. The PPS Strategic Partnerships team is responsible for fundraising and grants and all different ways of bringing in private resources. So we still think there will be collaboration between that department and the Fund for PPS, but there wouldn't be as much staff support running the organization as we move towards this new model.
and then my final question is around sort of transparency about the money that's spent. So would the key, I guess maybe the two key moments would be when the parent advisory group makes the recommendation to the board on the, that would just be on the formula, not on actually what gets distributed out. I'm just wondering, at what moment in time would we see that, or is it the end of the fiscal year, or?
What I would envision is that what the Parent Advisory Committee brings forth will be specific on where the $1 million will go, and the model would be used for the following school year as well, given where we are in time. But there is always a lag of like when accounting books close and then like actuals might come through. So I think that we would have like different touch points that we could report on. So it is in the bank account of the Fund for PPS right now. It will it's designated for Champion PPS schools, so it's being held in that account, and then they will recommend the formula for how those funds will be distributed for next school year. And what happens is that the Fund for PPS does ACH transfer of funding to the district during the summer, and then those funds are in place for PBS Finance for the books.
However million ways you're going to raise it, it goes in the fund, and the fund transfers all of it to Champion.
Yeah. So it's basically the term is called fund accounting, like as if we need to use the word fund a million times in order to. So it already is in a fund for Champion PPS school, but it basically will just go from the Fund for PPS's bank account to PPS's bank account. So it remains restricted.
So all the money that's raised is going for staffing.
Yes, in that pot, yes.
Is there another pot?
So the other pot would be the other general funds that the Fund for PPS raises. So when you go to the Fund for PPS donate page, there's kind of two options. So you can donate to the Fund for PPS or to Champion PPS schools.
Okay, so they are separate.
Yeah. So they're separate fund accounts. That's kind of the accounting term. Yeah. How it's tracked.
So then how will you apply for funds from the fund?
And we're using that word.
Instead of the champion.
So right now, the way the model works is that the general funds under the Fund for PPS are invested in programs and support for the. Also, people don't apply for it. It's kind of it's based on. That's what the Fund for PPS Board of Directors has discretion over, but it's based on the priorities of the superintendent and the school district and where we can see the highest return on that investment.
So more investor type people.
Yeah.
But somebody's deciding where to give it.
Yeah, sometimes, yes.
Yeah, and I was wondering, do the student representatives on the committee have an official vote?
Yes. That was inferred, not called out, but yes.
Great. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate it. And I want to start by saying, I actually really, the operating agreement is great, and the 3-year fundraising plan executive summary, I really appreciate. There's a lot there, and so I know you've been working really hard on that. It also is. It's going to take some time, right? As I look at what you're planning to do this year in year 1 and then year 2 and year 3, it's going to take some time. Can you update us on how much the Fund for PPS has raised since July 1 of this year? Since the new policy went into effect, the restricted local school foundation fundraising?
I cannot speak to that at this moment, but we will be bringing forth a financial report. There will be a written report, so we can map that out. At the end of last year, as the new policy was announced, you may recall, Jonathan made some comments of, you can sign up now to become a monthly donor. That really didn't generate much. So what has been raised has been through the corporate gifts and the ongoing activities of the Fund for PPS, not really the local school foundations or individual giving. So I think this is a critical juncture with the Parent Advisory Committee and hoping to generate more kind of engagement of that community.
Yeah. I mean, would you say we're on track to raise $3 to $3.5 million this year, or not?
No.
Yeah, and I mean, I know it, but probably not even close. Is that accurate?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Again, I appreciate the work plan you've put here. I think there's a long-term plan here which is going to work. I'm going to direct my next comments to the board, and I want to be careful about this because I recognize when the board moves forward with something, we all need to get behind it. I really, really want this to be successful. I actually supported the elimination of local school foundations. I didn't vote for the policy change because it was rushed and because we weren't ready to replace it with anything. And I'm glad we have $1 million that's going to roll over into next year that can hopefully replace some of the funding in our low-income schools. There's nothing next year that's going to replace the funding at all the other schools in the district. And we have shut off the spigot of fundraising that so many of our parents worked so hard on. I think it's incumbent on this board to take some accountability and responsibility for that and do whatever you can as a board, whether it's through budget actions, whether it's through fundraising, to rapidly raise the money that is now missing and will have a very direct impact on dozens of schools in this district and the students who attend those schools who are going to lose staff. They're going to lose librarians, education assistants, teachers, aides, etc. And it's going to have a serious impact. And this is great, but it's going to take you 3 years to ramp up. And I think it's worth just pointing that out. So.
Thank you. Yes, it is our responsibility too as a board to make sure this is successful. So please do our parts. Ms. Is there any more board discussion?
I guess I'll just chime in and say thank you for your comments, Director Scott, and also I really also appreciated the plan showing that what the activities that are happening over time that will help us to be successful. So the hiring of executive director, I think in year 2 or 3, the working on setting up endowments, working with United Way, you know, so you're putting the pieces in place so we will be successful over time.
I would say also there's nothing to stop the board if we have a great parent advocacy at the legislature and able to move the needle on that to designate a funding stream to the champions piece. Because there's 2 ways you can do it. You can like individually raise the money from individuals, or we could like collectively try and raise more money from, for example, from Salem, and you know, if we're successful, commit a portion of that, a small portion of the larger Salem ask could potentially be a revenue stream for that.
My mind. So people can donate to the champion or to the fund, and the fund is out there raising money. Sounds like for the fund, not champion. If it turns out that, boy, we really need more staff, can the fund transfer some of their money into champion? Is it available?
Sure, they could make a decision like that. There isn't a lot to work with right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Also want to clarify, it's champion, not champions, the after-school program. Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
Great, thank you. The board will now vote on 7019, resolution approving the operating agreement between Portland Public Schools and the Fund for Portland Public Schools. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Is there any abstentions? Student Representative Kasavi, please indicate your vote.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 7019 is approved by a vote of 7-0, with Student Representative Kasavi unofficially voting yes. Thank you. Remember, it's Fun for PPS on Facebook and Instagram.
With a donation.
All right. We were ahead of schedule, and now we're right on time, so that's a little late. So next up, we have public comment, general public comment. Ms. Bradshaw, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
We do.
Great. So just really quick for the guidelines for public comment, you have 3 minutes. When you see the red light, that means finish up your statements within 30 seconds. Also make sure that if there's any, what are the other guidelines? I forgot already. Any personnel issues, please direct that to the superintendent and not here. And also, please keep thank you. Make sure you don't mention students by name. Keep confidentiality. And also, lastly, when you begin your comments, please state your name and spell your last name. Thank you. Could you call the first?
Yes.
I don't know how many we have. Couple?
We have 4 people signed up. I'll call them all at the same time. Jamie Incrovaya, Megan Palmer, Dwayne Thomas, Jan Watt.
like to start, you may start when you're ready.
What's up, Eli? Thank you. My name is Dwayne Thomas. Thomas is the last name, like Thomas the Train. When I start, I'm not sure how to hit the right tone here. I am a parent. My child is at Richmond Elementary School, the Japanese dual language immersion school. And we're doing some really great things with the staff. The staff is phenomenal. PPS, Principal Stacy, Nurse Toby has been helping with our Black Student Union. I think we have the biggest Black Student Union of any elementary and maybe some middle schools. We have 20 students. We're meeting this week, Friday, and we'll meet again in 2 weeks. So we're doing a lot, in collaboration with the staff there without much, right? We were just talking about funding, and, the board was just talking about funding, right? We've had dozens of meetings with our children, and one thing I can vouch for, which I didn't expect, right? If you did a before and after photo of our children, their confidence was through the roof, I would say, at the start of the year, with 1 year on with our Black Student Union program. And so we've been really thrilled at that, right? I have to confess we need some help. I don't think it's much, but it would be extremely significant for us. Today, my child had to talk to her best friend who is leaving PPS because the child is being bullied, right? So there aren't repeat offenders at the school of the bullying, but our Black children are targets, right? I can tell us firsthand experience. We started a chess club as well at Richmond Elementary. I started a chess club. I'll be really, really specific. Our Black Student Union did, and we got funding that way, so quite creative. But 6 months ago, a child tried to trick another child to use the N-word in jest, right? And so 6 months later, not a repeat offender, but if there's a Black child around, they're going to be harmed by that, right? And the child that's leaving the school, another child reported a recent incident to that child of the N-word game being played, right? So, they're recognizing that this could be harmful for our Black children, right? So to us here, there was a job post for Black Student Union staff advisor. We'd like that to be paid. We're over a year on, and I think Black people should be paid for their work as often as we can. I don't know how else we support, these children without paying Black people for their labor. So that's the first ask. Okay. And the second one is for an assistant principal. Every decision, that affects our children, I think, would be best implemented throughout the staff with an individual to be a peer of the principal who's doing a phenomenal job. I would like to clone that principal if we can. So I won't put that request before you today. That's the impossible request, I think. I know we'll talk about funding and what the state can provide, but I'm asking for an assistant principal to help us out with implementing decisions that affect our kids all throughout the school day, right? I can't be there every day, right? And our teachers are doing a lot, our staff is doing a lot, and we would like to get that bit more of support that is extremely significant for our children and the safety of mine.
Yeah, thank you. Could you just finish up?
That was done.
Oh, you beat me to it.
Yeah.
All right.
That's me being done.
That was good. Thank you.
My name is Jamie Incorvaya. I am a teacher at Cleveland High School. I have been an educator for 20 years, 11 of which have been at Cleveland, but I did my student teaching at Jefferson. Go Demos. It's been a minute since I've been there. But I wanted to come today to talk about trust. I'm here mostly to speak about Cleveland and about our modernization. I'm also on the DAG committee, and I'm also a parent of 2 children that go to PBS schools, one of which is at Cleveland and one of which will also go to Cleveland. It will probably not be the Cleveland that it is today, And I wanted to start by talking about something that's been a guiding principle for me as a teacher since I learned this when I was at Cleveland with Andy Krulak, who taught me a lot about being a teacher. If you know him, you would know this also. There is no significant learning without a significant relationship, and we cannot have a significant relationship without trust. And I feel like part of what we're all doing here when we're talking about the modernizations is we're talking about trust, PPS and the city of Portland, and PPS and its communities where all the schools are, and trying to engage in rebuilding trust, I think, on a lot of different levels. And in engaging in asking for another bond, we are trying to ask the city to trust us again with a lot of money. And that is, I think, part of what is maybe the disconnect in some of this issue with the modernization, in the particular issue with Cleveland, maybe. Cleveland is a school where relationships are really what makes it work because it is not the place that makes it work. We have things like a lack of school spirit sometimes because we do not have a great place to go to school, but we have amazing people and we have incredible learning that happens. But there is a constant sort of scarcity mindset because of the facilities. So we kind of, how do we work around it? And while kids can learn to move beyond those things, that's not really what we want for children. That's like exactly what we don't want as educators, is for them to have to work beyond a scarcity mindset. Kids shouldn't have to be like, oh, we have no place to gather except the library. They shouldn't have to be eating in the hallway because the cafeteria doesn't fit them. So in 2012, we started this process saying the high schools are the way that we're going to meet the issue of every kid getting a comprehensive experience. So let's make all of those great. And that was the goal, for every high school to become great. But if what we're saying as we get to the finish line is that some of them are not necessarily going to get the same treatment, and we're going to talk about the budget in slightly different language with some of them, then how are we saying that they're all going to be the same? And that is maybe what we find slightly problematic, right? How are we possibly going to get a modernization that is commensurate with Benson, McDaniel, Lincoln, and their ed specs if we're getting 75% of our original ed spec budget? And what message are we sending to the children of the three schools that are left to be done if we're saying that they only deserve rebuilds that have a focus on essential academic programming, which implies a further scarcity model in the very phrasing of that? So I would just ask us to reconsider how we're phrasing the budgeting in that, and that in and of itself really does not imply that we are trying to do our best for kids if we're saying that we're focusing on only the essential academic programming when we have asked these kids to sit in a 100-year-old decrepit building, right, for this long, the worst school in the entire district, right? It is, though, and you know it. Jefferson might be worse. I haven't been there in a while, but when I was there, it was pretty bad, too.
Thank you.
I'm Jan Watt, W-A-T-T, and I'm here on behalf of Cleveland High School, as you well know. It has been my workplace for 56 years, and I am dang proud of it. This is what I understand to be true as of last night. The $468 million this board approved last May for Cleveland's modernization now has a new target. It's $108 million less, which we were told last night is not intended to be an automatic cut, but instead an attempt to reduce the total project costs. Thus, the project teams for Wells, Jefferson, and Cleveland have been directed to create updated designs, which ideally would lead to savings. My immediate reaction last week when I heard this was, well, our planning has been underway since August. We've had over 16 public meetings held with our stakeholders to seek their input. Thousands have already been spent on architects and designers and contractors, Yet now we're going to go backward, in my view, for a redo of design plans. And I'm questioning that. And please be honest with us. This will mean delays for all of us, because how can it not? Your goal was to meet January 7 to finalize the wording for the May bond, but you won't have redesign descriptions and costs that those voters will need to know by January 7. Kindly heed this advice from a veteran, ancient educator. Now that you've set these new budget targets, a new term for the public, please pledge publicly that these 3 schools will not be shortchanged, that their ed specs will not markedly differ, so that their students will end up receiving less than their counterparts at the 6 other high schools are enjoying right now. The public's faith and trust, both what the superintendent talked about tonight and Jamie talked about tonight, the trust depends on this pledge. Because if you fail to make this promise very clear in your campaign to voters, families of these 3 schools will not support this bond. If they believe these budget targets are really going to result in reductions in any way to their new high schools, they're going to vote no. My allegiance and loyalty to Cleveland and to this school district cannot be questioned, but I'm going to be very honest. I will not support any bond unless I too am assured that Jefferson, Wells, and Cleveland will not suffer from unfair and unjust budget inequities. After all, those 3,000 plus students at these 3 schools deserve what their counterparts are now enjoying in their high schools: adequate, functioning, safe, and updated buildings, so that equality, justice, and fairness are enjoyed by all of our high school students in PPS. And as Gary Hollins, the fine director of this board, often reminds us, we need to do right by our kids.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. It's always a huge appreciation, especially 56 years. Well, hearing from our employees and people who work in our schools. From what I understand, we're kind of a few years off from cloning technology, right? So we'll work on that. I don't know. All right, next up we have comments from our union partners. Greetings.
Angela Waniga, President of the Portland Association of Teachers. Happy to be here again today. First, just huge kudos to our superintendent for building strong relationships with a lot of our members. We're going to be having listening sessions with our member reps with the superintendent coming up in the next couple of months. And those are just kind of some of the actions that really do help our members feel heard and seen and appreciated and valued. I know that there was a point where we had a listening session, and one question our superintendent asked was, did anyone ask for your input? And all of our educators kind of looked around and were like, what? No, that's not what happens here. And I think that is a fundamental change that Dr. Armstrong is bringing to this district, and I really appreciate it. So just thank you and kudos. I just want to speak to first a little bit about what that parent shared with the Black Student Union and some of the racialized attacks that are happening, that have happened in our schools. And I heard him share, that really does hurt our Black and brown kids, but really it hurts all of our students to see and witness racism as well as to experience it. And often this is put on the backs of Black and brown educators and staff to resolve, right? So can y'all talk to these kids? Can y'all come together and help these kids feel affinity and support? And I wasn't born knowing how to support students of color through racism. That's something I learned. And so I hope that the work through our racial equity training that is required in our contract can help ensure that our educators have the skills they need to support students when they experience this, but also teach students and acknowledge the harm that has happened and repair that harm, and interrupt racist acts and racism when it is coming up. So I just wanted to appreciate that parent for speaking up and recognize that a lot of it also is training for our educators to know how to successfully interrupt and reteach lessons around how we can not be racist in our community, how we can accept all of our community members. I haven't had a chance to address this body since the election because I've been sick, but I wanted to just state that post our federal election, our elections, it's really critical for our board, for our union, for all of us to keep our educators, our students, our staff feeling safe and protected, especially against ICE, against anti-LGBTQ movements, against book bans. We know that from the previous term under Trump, that presence emboldened bigotry against our marginalized groups. We saw that in our schools playing out against administrators of color, educators of color, students of color. And we saw that at sports events where students were taunted with slurs. But we also saw the use of the Every Student Belongs guidance to help us support our students in our district. We also saw guidelines from this board around how we can respond if ICE comes to a school in order to protect our students and our families. So, that's why our school board exists, to make sure that we have that protection when things start to fall apart outside of our small bubble. We will be working as PAT to continue advocating and educating. We just held a Trans Justice, Trans Joy event and panel. We celebrated a book edited by a member about how we can support trans joy and justice in schools. We look forward to working with the board and superintendent to ensure that our students and school communities feel safe. They feel a sense of belonging, regardless of the attacks against things like dismantling the Department of Ed. Here, we have to make sure that every student and every community member feels like they belong and that they are safe. The governor's budget also came out recently, which included a recalculated current service level because of the spotlight that the strike put on the chronic underfunding of our schools. And as great as that is, because we needed a new formula for the current service levels, let's not be blinded by the fact that this proposed budget is still well below the quality education model, right? And I feel sometimes it feels very frustrating to keep talking about the quality education model and have folks, the legislature never fund to that and say, but you still deserve a quality education, students. We need to continue to advocate for the state to pass a budget that ensures that there are no cuts for next year. Current service model means actually continuing the current service. And so we will continue to advocate for more funding for schools at the quality education model. And we look forward to working with this board, with our community, with our fellow staff to fight for quality schools because our kids deserve it and they can't wait. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, President Bonilla. Next up, we have, thank you for your comments. Those are very helpful to hear, and we'll be talking and following up with a lot of these points. Next up, we have board committee and conference reports. We have recently had board members who recently traveled to conferences. But we'll start first with updates from the chairs of our policy committee and our facilities committee and audit committee. Then we will have board members who have traveled to the Council of Great City Schools Fall Conference, the Council of Urban Boards of Education Conference and the National Association of Black School Educators Conference speak as well. Director Pim Edwards, would you like to start?
I'm just going to take a pass because later on, the majority of our work the last 2 meetings have been around the cell phone policy, and we're going to have first reading tonight, so I'll just pass. Talk about it later.
All right, Director Scott.
Same with me. The next item is the general obligation bond, so I'll just talk then.
You guys getting an easy out of jail card. Director Sullivan.
Yes, I will say something. All right. The audit committee's next meeting has been scheduled for 12, sorry if I cough drop, it is taking a problem. So the audit committee's next meeting has been scheduled for 12/16 at 6:15. I would like to provide the board and anybody else who wants to come to this audit committee, you can do it on Zoom too. I would like to provide you with a preview of the agenda items we have planned. First, PPS's external financial auditors will be presenting the results of their audit of the district's fiscal year 2024 annual comprehensive financial report, shortened to ACFR, and the results of their audit on the requirements for federal awards report. Secondly, PPS's external bond auditors will be presenting the results of their annual bond performance audit for fiscal year 2022 to 2023, and this report is being referred to as the Year 5 bond audit. Thirdly, PPS staff will be presenting the status of the implementation of outstanding bond audit recommendations. And fourth, PPS staff will be providing the audit committee with an update related to the role of the audit committee in the selection process of the district's external financial auditors. This is probably going to be about a 2-hour meeting. Unfortunately for me, and also for Chairman Wong, I have a prior commitment and will not be able to attend this meeting. So I have asked Chairman Wong to serve as the chair of the audit committee for this meeting. He will also provide the board with a summary of the meeting at the December 17 board meeting, which is the next night. So thank you, Chairman Wong, for your willingness to do this probably fairly lengthy report. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't know what I signed up for.
Right.
Next, we have board members who travel. Do we have board members who travel to, should we start most recent and go backwards? Director Green, would you like to
I would love
start us
to.
off?
I would love to share. Thank you so much. Like I said last night, again, thank you so much for approving my travel. I look at it as professional development. When we go out of town and we get to connect with other board members in other states, how they're doing things, I get to share, sit with other superintendents, other staff, other educators. And one of the big things that I've been asking about, because I am very concerned about our modernization and how much we're spending. Not that we're doing it. I believe we absolutely, unequivocally need to fix our schools. And thank you for the map that showed our oldest schools, and because I think that gives us a guideline. Like, we can start with this. But I also recognize that when I was sharing across the country with the different ones, how much we're spending on our schools, there was literally a gasp. Like, you're spending what for how much space? Like, how many acres of land do you guys not own the land? Are you having to buy the land? It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable, to the point where they literally thought that I was lying. One gentleman told me, we thought that you were a liar, and then you kept talking. So then we thought that you were just simply uneducated. But then you kept talking, and the more you talked, and the more we realized that it was just unfathomable to us how much you're spending. I spoke with a gentleman out of Los Angeles who built a school, like state of the art. It's got an Olympic size swimming pool. It's got three gyms. It's got maker spaces. It's on 20 plus something acres of land. It's got a recording studio in it. It's got all these things. It's got ed specs for hours, built to 2,400 students, and it cost them $263,000 to do it. $263 million to do it. That's to me, that's unbelievable. When you're looking, we're not getting, real talk, we're not getting a fraction of that. We're not getting an Olympic pool. We're not getting state of the art, gyms, and we're spending twice the amount of that. And it wasn't just us. I mean, as far as like LA, it was in New York. It was in smaller places like, Idaho. It was unfathomable. And I've been asking this same question over and over again. And so that's the thing that I've been trying to, I've been asking different ones about. And it has, which is why, part of the reason why I'm pushing for this, because one of the other things that I found was that how we do it, with our CM, our construction manager, the CMGC. Not just are we the only ones, I shouldn't say the only ones, in the country, even in Oregon, within Oregon, it's other schools and other places are doing it where it's separate. And so it would be one thing if this was a industry standard, but it's not. And so again, it's causing me to ask a lot more questions so that we can quantify why we're doing what we're doing. Make it make sense, as my friend over here just stated. And I think her name is Miss Watts. Miss Watts over there. No, Miss Watt. Okay, Miss Watt stated, we want to make sure that if we're going to go back to the voters and say that it costs us $468 million to do this school, that they can rest assured that we have checked and rechecked and fact-checked and made sure that that's what the cost is. And if there's any excess fat in there, and I'm not saying that people are, that's not what I'm looking at. I want to make sure that I'm not paying too much simply because I didn't say I'm not paying that much. I'm a huge barterer. When I go out the country, I barter. I love it. Nothing gives me more joy than bartering. And so I was like, no, I get it. I want to make sure that I'm doing that with our money too, because I feel like I have an obligation to the people that I'm representing, not just to make sure that they get a state-of-the-art school, but that they don't spend too much either, because every dime that we spend over what we need to is a dime that I take away from something that we could be doing in the classroom, a teacher that we could be paying, a program that we could be establishing, a CTE, something. So I want to make sure it's right. And so I'm gonna be like a bulldog on it. I'm not letting it go. But they say you gotta put one in the head of this one, because he ain't letting go until it's done. I need to know, and I feel like the community knows that. So thank you for allowing me to go. I get a lot of information when I get out there.
Thank you, Director Green. Remember, nothing makes him happier than bartering.
I love it.
Nice.
Let's get this money.
Thank you. That's very important to hear. A valuable lesson. Director Hollins, do you want to go next?
Just say ditto. No, I'm joking. I was also able to have the privilege to go to some great conferences. And like Director Green has stated, we learned a lot of information. For me, as being on the board, is going on my 4th year, it takes a lot to learn this curve of the whole system of PPS, and so as we are, getting this PD for as a board member, it's informative as you learn from other board members who've been in this position longer than us, and so I just appreciate actually being able to go and learn from the wise counsel of other board members and some smart people who are smarter than me. I was able to go to Council of Great City Schools. If you don't know what Council of Great City Schools are, it's a conference that's focused on enhancing urban education through effective leadership, strategic goals, and monitoring, and fostering student readiness for post-secondary success. A couple of the things that I'll try to keep it short, some of the things that we learned in some of the workshops was one of the workshops I went to was for prioritizing professional development to ensure classroom success. This all talked about how we support our teachers, how we make sure our teachers have the supports they need in order to be successful in their classroom. And we had our own Christina Howard and Christina Moon actually present there as well, and they did an awesome job. Was very impressed. People was talking about it a little bit afterwards about some of the information as well. So they did an awesome job. Another thing that I go when I go to these, I look at how do we present as board members and how things can we do to get better. One of the things one of the workshops I went to was board roles and monitoring progress towards our goals. And those are really important for me because I want to be able to see how we as a board are really looking at how we are checking our goals on a regular basis. And one of the things that, I learned there was, we haven't got there yet. Even last year as chair, the goal was trying to really spend 50% of our time talking about academics, performance, direct student ideas. I've learned that that's a great practice across the country for effective boards. Also learning to board guide and governance, and that's really is really great to hear how board governance really works. I always think about Director Scott as far as learning about governance versus management. Right? Sometimes we can do things as a board that's really it falls into that management piece versus the governance piece, and it's always a reminder. And going to these conferences really gives me a continued reminder that I'm at the governance piece, not the management piece, which is hard for me as a business owner because I'm usually in the weeds of everything. And I want stuff to get done like right now, and I want to show them how to do it and which way to do it and which way to go and how to go and what to use. And so those are some of the things at the Council of Great City Schools I learned. We also had one that's called CUBE, which is another conference that is specifically for school board, one platform for school board members. Learning things about like navigating the challenges of school board leadership, how to avoid common pitfalls, and learning strategies to enhance transparency and accountability within our board operations. And I think that is when we talk about trust, for our communities, right? Being transparent, being accountable is really important. And so learning those things that we can use to be that, making sure that we're clear in our communication, right? Making sure that we are communicating exactly what we're trying to say so that everyone can understand. So it's not a miscommunication when we start talking about, things like, for instance, the modernization pieces, right? We really have to be clear in our communication so we can really get the point across of what we're really trying to do. And so the last one we went to was in Atlanta. It was called NASB. One of the things that I really loved about that one of the conferences I went to is how urban school districts are raising the volume of student voices. And I love student director to say we talk about, we're not just checking a box to say, okay, we're going to listen, we're going to hear our students, but then not really act on their words. And I'm a big proponent of our student voices. And I love the different ways that different boards has incorporated their student voices into their decisions. And it's just really, they have some really incredible ways that different districts are doing that. I think we still have one of the best ways, except for making the vote be a valid vote. But outside of that, just making sure that we are listening to our students, because that's who we're here for, right? We're not here for me. We're not here for the superintendent. We're not here for parents. We're here for our kids. And every decision that we need to make needs to be in benefit to each kid that actually, every decision that we make need to be the benefits of each kid, period. So that's kind of some of the stuff I learned there. That's it.
Thank you. It's very thorough. Enjoyed that one. Director Sullivan?
Yes, I also went to the Council of Great City Schools, and there were so many different interesting workshops, and the way they presented they usually had 3 different schools present on whatever the topic was. And it was just fascinating to see how different schools dealt with things in so many different ways. Then also, at the board one, you were there, Kimberly, the 3 of us, Michelle, you were there too. So it was really fun that we could all 4 be hearing the same thing and could discuss it. And then I got to know more of the staff that was there too, because I've only been on the board a little over a year, and it was just kind of opened things up, learned a lot. Some of the things that we studied, we looked at dual language programs and how they operate them in different schools. And this is the Council of Great City Schools, but we are definitely the smallest great city school that attends these. We're just on the edge. So in this one in Dallas, there was a school, 700 students were brand new to the country. Many spoke Urdu. They arranged to have Urdu teachers by actually training Urdu businessmen in the community to be teachers, because there weren't that many trained teachers speaking Urdu. Just the creative ways that so many people did things. And I also, there was one on evaluation of teachers totally across the board. One just really so specific and feedback for the teachers. The other one just come and talk to me about what you're doing and I'll support you. It was just amazing to see how people did things so differently. And same problems we had. Attendance, a big problem. And one that really was interesting to me, a lot of their attendance had to do with illness. And so every school had a nurse, and they contacted with a doctor that if a child came into the school not feeling well, they'd go to the office. Nurse would call the doctor, give symptoms, and if it was just, I need an Advil, then they wouldn't call the parent. And the parents have to sign up for this. They have to sign up and say it's okay. And so then many working parents, the parents didn't have to come and pick up the child didn't miss school, came the next day. And I said, well, how do you pay for the doctor? He said, they volunteered. So it was just interesting. I don't think we have as much of a problem with illness. Maybe we do, but I just thought so many different ways to look at things. And a big one was teacher retention, and just how expensive it is if a teacher leaves. Because if you've trained somebody and then they go, you're out. It's just like throwing away $25,000 right there. And so all the ways you can try to keep teachers. And some were things we couldn't afford. Have housing that teachers can afford. Have it just specifically for teaching. And I know Angela brought that up last year. And we said, well, we can't do it. It's a great idea, but we just can't do it. But just being able to go to these places was just eye-opening. Makes you really think about different ways to do things. And just bond with your friends. So that was great.
Thank you, Director Sullivan. These are all very compelling. Next time, I think we should invest in some GoPro cameras and stick it all on you. So we can all get bootleg versions of this. All right, next up we have discussion about the 2025 General Obligation Bond. I would like to turn over to Director Scott, who is the chair of the committee, to discuss our next steps.
Great. Thanks, Chairwoman. So we had a conversation last night. I know some of you watched or attended on the Facilities Committee, and we've been talking about the bond for quite some time. The conversation last night was really good. We had the entire board showed up. Thank you all for taking time out of your day. And we were really able to get to a general consensus on the proposed bond package with a couple of changes. And again, the changes have been made along the way based on public feedback, based on board feedback. And the package that was put forward tomorrow, what I heard from the board was a desire for a little bit more for athletics. So I know staff are going back to see if they can add, some money for athletics. It's, maybe in the $15 to $25 million range, to boost up that side of it. But otherwise than that, it seemed like we had general consensus. I do want to address, we talked about it yesterday, but I want to address, particularly given some of the testimony tonight, which is really important. And I want to reiterate that Cleveland and Ida B. Wells modernizations are fully funded in this bond package. I'm going to repeat that. They're fully funded in this bond package. So this bond package has $1.15 billion for modernization. That's the amount that it's always had. In fact, I think that amount went up a little bit in one of these recent packages. That is enough money to fully cover Cleveland at $468 million, Ida B. Wells at over $430 million, as well as extra money for Jefferson if it's needed. What the proposal does is it says to the community, we need to go back and take a look at those. I want to be really clear, the board did not authorize $468 million for Cleveland. That has not happened. What has happened is a design advisory group for both Cleveland and Wilson. We funded $20 million for each one of those schools in the 2020 bond. And that process has been underway to design some amazing buildings and amazing schools. That's what's happening right now. And yes, some of those cost estimates, they've been rising, right? When we first got them, it was maybe $375 and then $400. The more recent ones are well into the 400s. This is also the time in the process where we should be going back. And it's not just the staff, it's not just the board asking the questions. The community should be going back and saying, okay, what do we really need, right? Do we have a wish list? Can we narrow that down? And the reason I say that is really important to put it in perspective. Lincoln High School cost $225 million. It was finished in 2022. I was just looking chat GPT, so not sure it's 100% accurate, but it tells me the construction inflation between 2022 and 2024 was 34.8%. So that would mean the Lincoln High School at $225 million would be about $303 million today. I did my own calculations because I don't trust chat. And I said, well, what if it had been, 8% a year since, and I went back, we completed Lincoln in 2022, but I said, but we Lincoln started in 2020. So what if we do 2020, we do 8% inflation for 7 years, assuming that we start these high schools in 2027. And a $225 million high school turns into about a $380 to $385 million high school. So inflation is real in the construction industry. Any of you who work in this, I do this in my day job trying to manage capital projects at Metro. The construction inflation is real. These high schools will be much more expensive than Lincoln. But I don't know if they should be $100 million more than Lincoln when it has been inflation adjusted. And I think that's the question that's being asked. And what I really like about the superintendent and staff's package is they didn't come back and tell the community, you have $100 million less. What they came back and said to the community is, we think and we hope that we can begin to bring the cost of these schools down. And if we can, that's going to free up significant funding for grade schools and middle schools that are in desperate need of facility upgrades. And so honestly, it's not a matter of saying, we want to take something away from Cleveland or Wells. It's a matter of saying, if you can build those high schools for less, students in your zone and students throughout the district will benefit at other schools that also desperately need this help. And if you cannot, the money is in there for it. And I think that's the conversation we want the community to engage in. And it's why I think this bond package is actually really strong. I want to be really clear. I'm a Wells parent. I'm also a Wells graduate. I know how bad that building is, and this is something I desperately want to see happen. This is also the path forward. I will say one other just really blunt political thing. I think if we referred a bond that had $430 and $460 million for two high schools, it has a much higher likelihood of failing. They would be the most expensive high schools ever built in the country on a square foot basis. As I said last night, that is not an award that Portland Public Schools wants to win. So I am confident that we can build high schools that have everything that all the other new high schools have had, and we can do it in the most cost-effective way. And I will say publicly, and I think most of you know I'm not going to be on the board for very much longer, but I will say publicly that, I absolutely am doing this to make sure those high schools, that they also need to meet the ed specs. And that was a question you had. When I'm off the board, I will be absolutely sitting in that chair, making sure that I'm holding this board accountable for not shorting Wells, because that's my community. And I'll sit right next to the Cleveland parents to make sure Cleveland's not being shorted either. in terms of timeline, the current plan is to have a full board discussion. We really had a full board discussion last night, but to have a full board discussion at a board meeting on December 17th in 2 weeks, and then vote to refer to the ballot on January 7th. I would encourage you right now, today at the meeting, if you have anything, or shortly after, share with me, share with Dr. Armstrong, any remaining questions you have or changes that you wish to see in that bond package. And again, we've got the detail from staff last night. It's in the board book. All of that's available, but share that as soon as possible. I also understand staff have draft or very near to having draft bond language, which will also be part of the package that we come back on December 17th to discuss. And that's sort of where things stand. And I guess at this point, Chair Wong, I would see if there's any questions or board discussion.
Yes, is there any board discussion, questions, comments?
You want us to go ahead and put stuff on the tables. Did you want to go ahead, Michelle? Okay. Yeah, I wasn't trying. I don't need to go first, but it seemed like nobody was saying anything. So, okay. Well, so I had a couple things. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to hear that we're not going to be saying goodbye to Director Scott.
Oh, you have no idea.
You know how happy that'll make me.
Trust me on that.
So a couple things. I feel really strongly we need to have some sort of prioritization or planning for the deferred maintenance, just so it makes sense of the however many billions of deferred maintenance or priority improvements we have, like how we're going to go about it. That's the $190 million, and then whatever we get of the savings from the modernization pot. Both of those accounts, I think it would be important to be saying how we're going to prioritize things. It may not be the specific project, but how we're going to think about and prioritize. And the reason I say that is we haven't had an intentional long-term bond in more than 4 decades. The 1995 bond became a long-term bond, not because we had money over a long-term, it's just we didn't go out for a bond for another time. So generally our bonds have been fairly short, so there is a fair amount of accountability and institutional knowledge because the people who referred the bond are then on the board, usually it's the same superintendent, but in this particular case, unless everybody's going to be long tenured, but we potentially could have different senior leadership, different board members. I mean, very, very likely. I just think about 8 years ago, nobody at this dais was here besides me. And so the sort of being intentional now so that we know what's going to guide the values versus a new group coming in 8 years later. Like, I wonder how they prioritize the $4 billion. So that's one thing. I'm definitely going to want to see the referral language. I put on the table last spring and also last night the Center for Native Student Excellence, and I understand the PPS Native community is going to be coming in with a more specific proposal, so we'll have that for consideration. I also I appreciate that there's something else happening potentially on athletics. Again, I'm somebody who went to school every day because of athletics, and it taught me lots of life's lessons, and I've seen the value it has, just like it's music for other students, or math, or a whole variety of things, but I think athletics have kept our students engaged. I also know that PPS, we have one of the best middle school programs that's inclusive. We don't depend on club teams, which families have to pay for those students to participate. We have a really robust middle school program that keeps middle school kids busy, tired, active bodies, active minds. So I don't know exactly what's coming back in the package. I think we had a lot of ideas that were put on the table last night, but I would support that. Also would just note when we're talking about the cost of high schools, we should look at, I mean, Roosevelt, if you look at what we paid for it at the time, that actually isn't the number because we've actually had to go back because they got shorted on the ed specs. So actually the cost was a lot more because we have to go back and do it, just like we've got the final 20-something million in the athletics piece. But the same thing for the Lincoln community would say is that you sort of gave us the school, but you didn't do the whole thing, and now there's another increment in this bond to fill it out. So in some of those, the other numbers on the modernizations are because not everything was completed, and there have been additional allocations since then. So what I like about the athletics piece this time is we're finishing out some commitments to schools that, whether it's Roosevelt from 2012, Lincoln from 2017, Grant from, this is like 2000, is we're going to have high schools that are going to have equitable facilities. And it's not just for sports, it's also for PE classes and used for a variety of things. So those would be my items at a high level.
I just wanted to say, I'd like to see the inclusion of the Center for Native Excellence. And I understand that, I know we're not taking testimony on this, but there was somebody that was signed up on our waiting list to speak to this, Noreen Smokey Smith. I don't know if she's in the audience or not. Also excited about the athletics and the movement space for kids. I think that's really important. And that's it. I feel comfortable with the fact that we do have the full amount funded for the high schools that the community expects. They're not going to be shortchanged. And that's it.
Yeah, and then my question is, will the cost affect any performing arts or extracurriculars?
I think that's a great question. I think the key message is that it's at this point proposed costs, and so until the design is complete and we cost projects out, we have no idea what the actual costs would be. But I appreciate the question, and I'm reflective of some of the public testimony on potentially losing $95 million or $108 million or whatever that number may be when we still don't know what the soft or hard costs are. So we have a proposed number only, and so the only goal is to bring down the proposed number so that we can still build a high-quality high school to ed specs and all of the other expectations. And if it brings our cost down, great. If it doesn't, we know that we have some still in the pot to address all of the needs that we needed to make. But the costing out of the actual high school won't happen until months and months from now. So it's a number that we won't have nailed down until it's time to start talking about now what the actual calculated costs are. Does that answer your question?
A question about this, and maybe this is also a question for Dr. Scott, because I think I'm understanding it a little bit differently. So you have this $1 billion for modernizations, and they go back, they do the design, but we're staying with the ed specs, maybe not some of the extras, but the ed specs. And then over time, they get costed out, and there are savings. And we may not know that till after the election, but those savings would go in a bucket. It could be anywhere from 10 to 470 million. And then we'll have had a conversation about and here's where, if we have 10 to 470, here's maybe our list of prioritization of where that would go, and at a certain point, whatever increment of money you have, that's what's available for the other pieces. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Scott? Okay.
Yes. The other portion then would be to address the heating, cooling, mold, and rats issue that we heard a lot about in the previous year. That's called the mold.
I heard JJ ask, would it affect performing arts?
Yeah, so there's no way of knowing that until we know what the design and the calculated costs and all of the other construction parts that happen. And quite honestly, in most places there's like a number for the bond package and a list of things, but you don't typically see the cost of a high school in the front end when we have no idea what it's going to look like. Like I said, we don't know soft costs, hard costs. We don't know the furniture the teachers are going to pick out or staff are going to pick out. So we don't have any of those numbers yet. We put forth a number saying, here's our target. And so we're just looking to pare that down a little bit and be in the range of what a typical high school costs that has all the things that we're asking for high schools to have. But until we know the furniture, the building, all of the other things, then it's impossible to answer that. We want the community to design the space that they need. We want our teachers and all of the ones who are currently in program to, while of course, referencing ed specs, to be able to design a space that they've been waiting for. And so our plan is to make sure that happens for Jefferson, for Cleveland, and for Ida B. Wells.
I have a follow-up question. That was a great question about the performing arts spaces, but it's my understanding that the ed specs include performing arts spaces. So in all of the, modernized high schools, they've all got these performing arts spaces.
Well, the example
in them, and so I thought that was included as part of like a base package.
Yes, and just to the point, and I think this was an example last night, where we have Jefferson with their dance program or their performing arts center is beyond ed specs. It's greater than ed specs, and so maybe there was something else that they decided that they were going to do in place of it or reduce because of. And so I don't know what Cleveland or Ida B. Wells design groups may say, right? We really feel like it's a process that should be had and held in community, and so and that's when the experts like Dan and team come in to kind of shepherd through that process and get through the negotiations. But I think it just really illustrates the point that we're talking about a big number when we don't even yet know what it's going to be, what it'll look like, and what it'll have in it, and what the community will weigh in. But I am confident that we will have, with this $1.8 billion bond and the 1.1 for modernization, we will have the funds to make sure that every school listed on the bond is getting what they need and what they desire as well, except for rooftop pools or anything like that.
So it's worth noting, and we should probably post the ed specs because it's a 73-page document. I went back and looked at it last night again, and there are some things that are in all the schools but actually aren't in the ed specs. For example, it's my understanding choir spaces aren't in there and aren't in the ed specs. I was going to try and go look. But I think it would be worthwhile for people to understand, because then there's two columns. There's recommended and then there's preferred. And the recommended is like the basics, and then the preferred is kind of extra, like you need better. In some schools, like, hey, we have more CTE, or we're a science-focused school and we have these other things. But it will give you a sense of what's in and what's out. And like I say, there are some things that are in all the schools, but they aren't in the ed specs.
They're posted, by the way.
I'm going to speak real quick. You was talking about athletic stuff. I wanted to say this last night, but I wasn't able to. So when we talked about the athletics piece and we had the list of athletics that they was talking about, I asked the Director Marshall about middle schools and elementary schools. So I'm going to just throw out some stuff. I'm going to send this out as well. But I think, for instance, Ockley Green, we need to look at putting money in Ockley Green, George, Lane, Beaumont, Roseway Heights, and Rose City Park Elementary. Now, if there's other ones that I missed, let me know. But I'm going to just put those out there. I have a list of the dollar amount that we have for those schools, so I will mention those. I will put those in the form as well. Thanks.
Well, I actually wanted to go back and ask a question because I know a couple of directors talked about the Center for Native Student Excellence. And first, I want to preface by saying whatever we can do as a district to focus on our Native students is part of our goal. It's part of the board's mission as well. I think what I'm maybe my question and maybe a little bit of concern is reading through the proposal. There's not a dollar amount associated with it. There's actually not a whole lot of detail associated with it. It's a pretty broad outline, and it just, to be really blunt, it doesn't feel like it's anywhere close to being ready for a LUA voter when we think about sort of the specificity around what we're doing. And I guess the other question I wanted to ask was around engagement. I know that working with tribes at Metro, it is a really important part of the process to make sure that all of our tribes and all of our Native community has been part of the co-creation of any sort of effort around this. And I guess my question is this ready to move forward, or are we more in a place of wanting to potentially give some direction to the superintendent and staff of some efforts we want to do to bring forward such a proposal for a future bond or for some interim type of financing or effort?
I've thought about this too, and I've been concerned about the engagement process, wanting to make sure the Native American community is not a monolithic community, and we want to hear from as many people. But there's already been quite a bit of discussion within the school communities, connected Native American school communities here. And perhaps we refer, since we have this kind of unfunded or vague proposal, we do much like we did for the Center for Black Student Excellence, where we say we'll dedicate it. I think for the Center for Black Student Excellence was a $60 million was in the 2020 bond. That was for the robust engagement process. That was for the planning of the Center for Black Excellence, but not to fund the thing or the artifact, the building, but it was for the planning piece and the engagement piece, and getting the operating agreements and such. So perhaps if we don't have a fully fleshed proposal, we put money in, demonstrating a commitment to go beyond the land acknowledgement, actually put our money where our mouth is, to serve the students that we are able to reach.
And just to build on that, again, this came out of the ABT resolution where we amended the resolution that we had to acknowledge the Native community that was here, and the director said we should be doing more than just land acknowledgements. And so the origination of the proposal last spring did come from the Native staff and community, the two-pager, and they are, I think they have a meeting tonight where they're going to put something together to bring back and to put forward for consideration. So I hope to have that by our December 17th meeting.
So I'm gonna just
it's very much coming out of the Native community, not from the non-Native community, from our staff, Indian Ed.
And there's a promise, of working with all of the tribes. So, but right now who we've heard of are from our close Native American communities that are connected to Portland Public.
Well, I'm gonna just, and I said this before, I think the difference, and this is just from my own understanding, I think the difference between the Black Center of Excellence and the Native Center of Excellence is, when Black folks was displaced and putting something in there to help our kids get to a place that were forbidding or prohibited from even attending PPS schools. And I know Native Americans, but they were the original land people here. And so for me, if we're really talking about right and wrong, is not to put money forth. For instance, and I'm just using the Black Center for Excellence as an example. The same institution is putting something forth that they can still control and own. If we're really talking about making a wrong a right, then we wouldn't be talking about putting money for another. We wouldn't put money in for people that land was stolen from, to just own the building for them to use. We will give the land back. And so it's hard for me to gather that, you know, we want to say, okay, well, we'll build you a building that the land from the land we stole in the first place and then let you use it versus saying, no, we're just going to give your land back and you do what the hell you want to do with it. And so for me, if we're going to really be intentional and sincere about making amends or making a wrong a right, then that's the way we should be looking, not to say, well, the institution that took your land is going to build you one and then we're going to rent it out to you or we're going to let you use it. And they still don't have ownership of something that was stolen from them.
I'll just say, again, this suggestion came from them. I guess if they had brought up that idea of just give us the land back, but that's not what they proposed. And
was that even an option for them to bring up?
I guess we'll see what they come back with. Like I say, there's a meeting tonight where it's being discussed, but this was what they came up when I talked to the community after Michelle said we should stop just doing land acknowledgements because that's just
performative.
Well, when they do have a meeting, I would love to have that presented to them. Would you rather own the land and have the land, or would you rather for us just to build you the land and see what they say?
Well, I want to just chime in that our board goals specifically call out Black and Native students as the communities that are historically and currently underserved.
And Hispanics.
Yes.
No, it's not
and
just
students
two
of color,
groups.
and specifically calling out the communities that we have underserved for 170 years. And I hear what you're saying about, you know, why would we be controlling something? The fact of the matter is this is bubbled up from this community. This would be helpful to this community, and it goes beyond just acknowledging and naming all the different tribes that are here and actually demonstrating with our commitment to build a center that focuses on Native learning and Native excellence beyond what the land acknowledgement does. It's also we're also federally required, you know, through treaties to serve Native American kids. So this would be a great demonstration of.
I'm for all of that. If we're going to give them the option, if we're talking about not just land acknowledgements, it would be better to say, you know what, here we're giving this back to you versus we're just going to let you use this. And if they had those options, I would think that their option would be like we would rather have our land back versus that we would just let us use the land again. And I would all be for that. If we was looking at to give some land back, absolutely. But if that's not where we're going, we can't really be talking about, oh, well, we just want to do something beyond land acknowledgements if we're not really willing to go all the way with it.
Well, I think what we said about
I'm sorry, but I think we need to move on with this conversation. Thank you, Director Hollins. I think your input is very important. I didn't give any input yet, so I'm just going to give my input and then we're going to move on. I'm kind of in between Director DePass and Director Scott. I feel like it is important. We do need to do as best we can for our Native American communities because it's the right thing to do. At the same time, my worry is that if it's a rush process, we might be creating something that is not what's going to be best for many of our communities. So so my ask is perhaps this needs to be kind of fleshed out a little bit. Is there a process perhaps that we can go through, look at the proposals and consider them and come up with some options?
Just one point of clarification. Is this a school or is this a center?
It's a center.
And we're at the same point of the discussion where we were in 2019 when we were referring to 2020 bond, and it was like, what is it? Is it a place? Is it a thing? Is it a center? Is it a scattered site concept for Black excellence? And all of those questions were not answered yet, which is why we put money in the 2020 bond to allow the time for the community. When you're talking about community benefits, it is not defined by us, it is defined by the community. What would be helpful to you?
And 5 years later.
And yeah, 5 years later we're still talking about it, but at least no one can say that we didn't have a process. We've had a process, we've had the conversations, and I feel like it's been a really intentional, it hasn't been rushed, and neither will this be. We don't want to rush through anything, and we don't want to we don't want to decide for the community what's best for them, which is why we want to allow the time and have the budget to have those discussions and develop a shining example of a Center for Native American Excellence that is wanted by that community. Those communities, I'm sorry, within us.
Thank you. I need to wrap this up, and it sounds like there's some homework to do. We could come up, proposals come your way, come up with some options by December 17th. All right. So next up, we have a kind of a discussion about board stipends. I brought this up because, as you know, elections are coming up in May, and one of the things that has been kind of brought up is the accessibility about running for board. Now, as many of you know, maybe not everybody, but board in Oregon, this is an Oregon issue, we have kind of an old relic system where board members are volunteer positions, are unpaid. What that means is that there's a lot of people who could run for board, who should run for board because of their expertise, because of their knowledge, passion for education, but are unable to because they cannot afford it. Now, I know Director Bryn Edwards has addressed this issue earlier before in the policy committee, but one real thing that has been done in this last year was that the Oregon, our state legislator passed in a bill, to help alleviate this old relic system of keeping some people out, passed what is called a stipend, which is like boards are allowed to grant up to about $500 a month stipend for board members. And it's up to $500 a month. Now, this may not sound like much, but maybe if there are some people, it is not much, but if there's some people who almost can run, but, for example, it may help with childcare or transportation costs or, dog sitters, who knows, right? Extra food, or just not have to live paycheck to pay, well, maybe they're still living paycheck. But the point is that it is trying to lower the bar for entry at least a little bit until we can get a better fix, and that should be definitely on the legislative agenda. But in order to increase access to running for the board, one of the things that I wanted to propose right now, and the reason for right now is because if you know, the filing period for running for a seat on the board is between January and February. And I wanted to propose something now so that if there are people who are thinking about running, they know that there is something, if there are people who might be on the edge of being able to run, knowing that there's going to be a stipend that could help them, may allow more candidates. As you know, democracy depends on more candidates running. So what I like to kind of present before you are some options. Now, a little bit of story. Right after the Oregon State's legislator passed the $500 stipend, immediately right after, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission raised a conflict, basically just struck it down, raised a conflict of interest concern, saying that board members cannot vote for their own, basically to pay themselves. And so Oregon School Board Association came up with a couple workarounds. So I'll kind of give you a couple options. And the part of the discussion here is kind of see where the board is in terms of wanting to explore this or have a resolution put forward at some point. So the first option is, I'm just going to read this email. The school board members could adopt a stipend for future board members. What that also means is that school board members who might run in the next election would need to declare a potential conflict of interest before participating in the discussion and vote. The stipend would go into effect for a future office holder after an intervening election. This would potentially provide stipends to some but not all board members at the outset. The second option that the Oregon School Board Association has identified is that school board members could vote on individual resolutions for each school board member. A school board member would need to declare an actual conflict of interest for their stipend resolution and refrain from the debate or vote. This means that if the board is split on this issue, we could end up approving stipends for some board members, but not others. This is how we tell who likes each other.
Are we approving them for board members specifically or for zone seats? I mean,
so
is it specific to the...
in this case, like for example, if we're going to vote on you, you would have to declare a conflict of interest and abstain from the vote, and everyone else would vote for your stipend. And again, this is up to 500, so it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, like for example, I would give Herman $1, and then he can bargain with me to bring that up. All right. I was trying to bring that back at some point.
So every time you have a change in board members, you'd have to approve that specific board member?
Yes, so here is the kind of, not catch, it's a twist in the story. This is kind of seen as a temporary fix because right now the Oregon School Board Association has proposed some legislation to fix this. I think there has been some word with the Oregon legislature that they are going to try to fix this and work around, reword the wording. And yeah, that's all I got. Did I miss anything? I feel like I missed something.
So in order for it to be effective for people who are running next time, you have to do it now? Or is this more like declaring the intent so people know that it could be a possibility?
Yes, so for example, if you're not running again, then there's going to be an open seat, right? What we right now can do as a board is that the people who are running again would have to declare a potential conflict of interest, and the rest of the board would vote for the incoming board to get up to a $500 stipend. That avoids the conflict of interest because now we're not voting to give ourselves money. Does that make sense? And then the other option is that we just individually, one at a time, you know, we're going to vote for Patty to get $200, and we, you know, put the motion together.
Where do these funds come from? They come from our general fund?
Yes.
Yes, it would have to.
So I think it's worth further discussion because I do know for some people that would make a difference. Just I know there's some small local governments that actually do a stipend thing for service, sort of like the school boards, and it's not a lot, but it's not. I think it's also worth having a much more robust conversation about people having their expenses covered because, well, I think most of us drive to meetings or go to schools or go to events, and we pay for parking, we pay for mileage. The reality is those are all expenses that you could get reimbursed for, and we don't often talk about that. I know you're thinking about all those parking.
I bike, remember?
Okay. So I think that's another option to think about it. While we're doing everything else, because that's something actually we can do without anything else. I also would think just this spring, as we're in the midst of budget cuts, what the perception would be to implement it.
Yeah, I think the counter argument is two things. One is that it's a stipend, which means if board members who don't need it don't have to accept it. So, like, for example, if there are some board members that can afford to not, you know, maybe they should not. And it's up to you. But what it also means is that what if potentially it could increase the quality of candidates that we get, right? And as you know, like quality candidates, I'm not saying any of you are not quality candidates, but I'm just saying 10 years from now when all of us are long gone and doing better things, you'll be back. We should move this.
No, I think what's important is that we're trying to solve for lowering the barrier for people to be able to serve single parents, that might need to order a pizza a couple times a month, get a babysitter. That's what I'm talking about. Like, make it easier for people. We want to diversify the board.
Exactly. And then the other point.
I think that having a stipend is different than getting reimbursed once you're on the board. It's just communicating that your expenses would be reimbursable up to $500. Maybe we make that known.
Thank you. And the other point is that, having quality candidates could end up, is better for a school district, period, right? So if there's potentially good candidates that are not running just because they can't afford daycare, we are losing, right? Our students are the ones who are losing. And so if we could do what LA School District does, which, you know, just so you know, board members in LA School District get paid $120K. And they have a staff person.
7 staff people
seven
and a car allowance.
Yeah, but
also, we're not there yet.
But also in
$500.
LA, that's their job.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
it's also
This is
yes,
not our jobs.
600,000.
It's not our day jobs. In LA, that's their job. They're expected to be there, you know, working as a job, not as volunteer board members.
And 125,000 in Los Angeles is about 500 in Portland.
Now, just also, I know, $500, you know, for people who are living paycheck to paycheck, $500
I get that. I just wonder, so, and I'm channeling Director Scott here. So where do we take from to do that? Where's the trade-offs?
I mean, we could leave it so if we're solving for trying to diversify the pool of people that would be able to serve, then maybe we leave it to the person that gets the seat to determine, and we as a community decide that that's an important enough expenditure.
I guess my thing is when we're talking about, we'll have almost a $34 million in the next biennium. We'll have a $34 million deficit that we have to make up. Now, I understand the additional, you know, $35,000 or whatever we're going to spend on board members. But I'm just maybe I'm just struggling myself. Is that if we got $35 million in cuts that we're going to have to take, I just don't see the importance of this type of conversation when we have our kids that we have to deal with, making sure that they get everything they need to have.
What about our board travel? Our board travel budget, we could just wipe that out if we really care about where the money's coming from. So we spend a lot of money on travel.
And the other kind of
that's visible spending.
That's a good point. The other also thing about, I mean, we're talking about board members oversee the budget. We're talking about millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in budget, making decisions about hundreds of millions of dollars. $6,000 a year is not really, you know, if it means we can get quality candidates, right? A board member who has the potential of losing the district millions of dollars and having quality candidates could mean we're saving.
So when you say quality candidates, I guess for me that means all the candidates previous hasn't been quality. Like, I'm just saying, so that when you say that, it's like, well, nobody else was quality. Like, we're going to miss out, and I don't think you miss out on quality candidates over $500. I think we have had quality candidates over years and decades. I don't think at this time. Now, I'm not saying later on down the road, but at this time, it just doesn't feel right to take something from a district that is already in a budget deficit.
Well, to be blunt, as a former employee of PPS for over a decade, have been board members who were not quality candidates.
But the $500,
I'm not saying you.
But the $500 would not have stopped them from running.
Well, we don't know that.
I think it's the definition. Yeah,
Can I just say, as someone who's not going to get a chance to vote on this, I think, unless you're bringing it forward soon, I think y'all should pass it. I think that, you know, it's, again, you're not passing it for yourselves. You're passing it for the next board. I think that board members will have an opportunity to take it or not. That creates a challenging dynamic. I mean, I know we give stipends for volunteers who come, you know, to Metro, and it's a real challenge in terms of the sort of stigma around that. So, I mean, we'd have to manage that. But, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the budget. It's $42,000. If everybody takes it, everyone won't take it. You know, that I agree we should pinch pennies everywhere we can. But I also think this is one of those things the legislature passed it for a reason. It's been pushed for a reason. And we have heard from people who've said there's no way I could give that time without some compensation. And so whether you get, you know, I mean, people that are sort of like us maybe, or maybe you'll get some folks who would have loved to run but said, I just can't afford it. I actually would really separate out expenses from stipend. A stipend is reimbursing you for your time. The expenses can still be covered on top of that. And I think it's totally fair for someone, who maybe works, like a relatively low income job, and they say, what, that would be hard for me, but okay, what, I would make that work, right? It would be worth my time in order to do that. I've always wanted to do it, and it might, bring someone forward willing to do it.
Yeah, and I look forward to having a deeper conversation on this topic, but I was wondering would student representatives be included in this as well?
I think they should. Good question.
That's a great question. I love that.
All right, so what that means is there's enough board members that we could come up with a resolution for December 17th or January 7th meeting. One of those. So I think we'll have a discussion afterwards and figure out what day we can kind of present a resolution. Is there a preference between us voting for a future board versus us voting individually for each other?
Well, I don't think I can respond because I'm running. And so I plan to run again for my seat and run very hard. So I can't, I don't think I can. I can't. I mean, y'all brought it up. Somebody said, it's like, you can't, I need to acknowledge it. So if I need to point it out, let it be known, let the record show that I'm not going to vote for it because I plan to run. So this, I guess, a public announcement. What's good, world? I'm running.
I personally think, Chair Wong, voting on individual ones is a little odd.
Okay, so we'll do a resolution for voting for the future board members.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next topic. We have the, here we go, first reading of the new policy, student use of personal electronic devices. Director Bidden-Edwards, would you like to introduce this topic?
I would, thank you. It's been a long time coming. But I think we have a really good policy draft tonight. So tonight we're going to have a first reading or the introduction of a district-wide cell phone policy which would restrict students' use of cell phones or other electronic devices during the school day. The policy committee started working on this last spring, researching policies from around the country and hearing directly from principals, teachers, staff, students, and parents. During the summer, we built plans for fall engagement with school communities and students, and I want to thank last year's student rep and this year's student rep for working with Dr. Adams to put together a student survey to ask students about this policy development. And that got rolled out this fall, and more than 2,000 students, 2,147 students to be exact, which is, I think, of all the issues we've surveyed students on, and we've surveyed them on a lot, that is the most I've ever seen, and really from broad representation from across the district, both high school and middle school students. And we were asked by students before we did the survey, if we surveyed them, they stated that they would want their viewpoints to inform our policy. And so we did design it. We didn't say, do you want to have a policy or not? Because we knew we were going to have a policy. So we didn't ask things that I felt were things that we definitely, like if students said, no, we don't want a policy, that we were going to back off. So we didn't ask them things that I felt that we wouldn't have considered. So in addition to the survey, Dr. Adams also conducted focus groups with students at Cleveland and Grant who have full-day cell phone restrictions. We had a presentation at a committee meeting from Dr. Adams of the survey results, and I'm just from very high level just going to touch on it. A majority of students who responded wanted cell phone-free classrooms. Most students see and feel the academic benefits of cell phone-free classrooms. Students advocate for appropriately serious and consistently enforced consequences for cell phone use to encourage policy adherence. Students strongly desire access to cell phones during non-instructional time, especially lunch. In addition, students said cell phones provide students a sense of safety. Students worry about access to emergency services and communications with their families. Students who leave campus during lunch report feeling unsafe without the ability to communicate in case of an emergency. Students report that non-English speaking families are reluctant to call front offices to reach students with important information. And students who use phones as medical devices or to contact outside resources for their physical and mental health worry about access. So I want to thank the students. I thought we got really great feedback. I thought for me, some of it was surprising. Like students were like, no phones in classes. Like we agree on that. We might like them, but we agree that's probably the place that's most important for us not to have access. I want to thank Dr. Adams as well. I know in addition we all heard from parents who have a variety of perspectives on the issue, and we received some informal surveys from teachers at different schools. I want to thank Director Sullivan DePass as well, who are the other committee members, for your work on this, and also to the two student reps who straddled the conversation. In a total, we had 10 policy committee meetings where this was either a majority or a significant portion of the agenda. At the last two meetings of policy committee, we solicited from all board members, since there was an interest from not just the committee members, but from all board members, what their views would be on sort of the core elements of the policy. And I then tried to build a draft that I felt reflected a consensus of the board, not just the committee. And I think we're pretty close there. And the common elements that are in the cell phone policy, first is a statement of values of why we're putting this policy in place. That just frames it all up. Second, it's a district-wide policy. Third, for kindergarten through 8th grade, policy is off and away for the entire school day. For high schools, it's off and away except for during a designated lunchtime, and definitely no phones during class time. The policy allows principals to have some discretion to add more restrictions than this base policy. There's exceptions to the policies that were added for certain health and medical needs and alternative schools. There's a provision related to discipline, which is linked to the Students' Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, including a provision indicating that phones can be confiscated. And there's also a prohibition on using phones to bully or harass. So it actually is, for all the time we spent, still a rather short, high-level, directional policy that will have administrative directives and administrative guidance that would go out to the schools in terms of implementation. I also want to note that Director Sullivan also asked about curriculum or guidance on the smart use of technology or how social media is impacting our students. And that was an excellent question. And the staff report does touch a bit on this about what's currently underway in terms of digital citizenship. So we shouldn't just be telling students like, you can't use that, it's bad. But really like how to be responsible. We know all these students are digital natives, and they're need to learn how to use technology in ways that are responsible and that also protect their social and emotional mental health. And I want to note that you also ask Dr. Sullivan, that like the board be briefed on what currently is being offered to students in terms of curriculum or resources. And so I would hope, Chair Wong, that that's something at a future board meeting we could have a briefing or presentation on, so that again, it's not really something you put in policy, but that so the board is briefed on what our students have access to in terms of being good, positive digital citizens. We advanced this policy out of committee with a recommendation for a first reading on November 13th. And then yesterday, we had a policy committee meeting in which we just took public comment. It was designed to have people have one more opportunity to provide comment before we rolled it out for first reading. So the next step would be, so tonight would be the introduction, and then we'd have a 21-day public comment period. Perhaps changes would be made, or not, or we could just adopt the 21, we could just adopt the policy that we had recommended and we had a first reading on. And with that, I'm going to ask the other committee members if you wanted to say anything, or Dr. Wong, I know you have an amendment you would like to offer. You're not a committee member, but obviously this is the time when, and again, I think it's more appropriate here than in the committee because we have the full board and we know the full board has a point of view. So,
Or should you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
You want me to go first? Okay. Oh, pressure. Okay. I'll go first. So, I've attended almost all the policy committee meetings or have watched all of them. And one of the issues that I kind of want to bring forward is that, and the reason I'm proposing this amendment is 2 out of the 3 policy committee members wanted the policy to say all day, that the phones are off and away all day. The other reason behind this is also, so basically I offered an amendment which is it takes the original draft policy and just deletes the section for high school. So it's not a separate rule for high school, and then deletes the title for middle elementary schools in the next section so that the middle elementary school rule applies to everybody, which is basically, so the only difference between these two, the amendment and the original, is that the policy is now that the personal electronic devices must be off and away all day. The other reason for this is because overwhelming majority, almost unanimous, principals, teachers that have responded to this said that off and away, except for certain times of day, was the policy they had years before and did not work. So they wanted off and away all day. And not only that, but when we look at experiences across the country in other districts, other schools, and in other countries that have gone from off and away during class to off and away all day, they've seen, for example, I'm citing a study from the entire country of the UK, they've seen a 7% increase in test scores among students after this policy was implemented, including a 14% increase in test scores for reading and math for the lowest performing students. And the practicality of it is that in schools, having worked in schools, having been lucky enough to teach before smartphones were a big deal, and teaching after smartphones became introduced, I saw the big difference. And one of the challenges is that, the reality of school and enforcement in school is that when you have exceptions in the off and away policy, it becomes unenforceable. There's holes that happen, students push on these holes, and suddenly you're back to square one. And that's been happening over and over and over again. So much so that the schools that have seen the success of the schools that have done off and away all day want that too. And they are now escalating to try to restrict it off and away all day. So having a unified district policy where every school has the same rule means that we no longer have the Wild West again, where like every school is on their own, they do their own thing, they do their own rules. Now if we have a district-wide policy, we can have, with the same rules for everybody, we can have district support, we can have set guidelines and procedures so that we don't have that. And also take into account our student input, like for example, the concern for safety. We should definitely look into mechanisms where we can have devices be unlocked on their way out, for example, or like have devices, ways of securing it so that in emergency they can access it. We are listening. That is very serious, but we also have to look at the studies. We also have to look at the data, which is strongly supporting off and away all day. Again, but the crux of this is that 2 out of 3 of our policy committee members want it off and away all day, and so I wanted to offer that up to the full board so that we can just honor the wishes of the majority of the policy committee. Thank you.
And I should just note that, because it makes it sound like I didn't allow anybody to offer amendments, so there wasn't, it could have been offered in committee. So, I just want to be clear, because it makes it sound like there was like no amendment. So we had a lot of discussion, and again, tried to build a consensus around when we had the full board weighing in on the core elements. It was where's the full board versus like where's just the committee, because then you have like a whole separate piece. But Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine for you to offer it here. I just don't want people to think like I stopped them from offering an amendment.
No, we could have been stronger and offered it. I put
Yes,
it on it.
Agreed.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I have overstated and
so-
tracked, yeah.
The thing that scares me about not having it for the whole district, the policy all day, and we say you can be stronger if you want to, is that some schools are going to have off and away all day. In fact, you guys probably all got this today from Roosevelt. Did you? I mean, this states it better than I could have stated it. And I will state it. Now, it says, this person-by-person enforcement, which is what it would be if we said some schools, or you can have it at lunch, and some say, oh, good, let's have it at lunch, and some say not. That's person by person, school by school. And school by school policy and school by school policy making also serves to continue to widen the disparity in education between lower SES schools like ours and a school like Grant or Lincoln, where there are strong and strict policies in place that include tools like launder pouches, lock boxes, etc. We need the burden of enforcement to be taken off of teachers to leave us free for the relationship building and instruction we need to do, and to normalize a serious attitude about phone use across the district, which may require some heavier norming of this policy between administrators. That, I think, is really important. Many of us crave phone-free classrooms for everyone's benefit, but we need conviction and backup behind the words of the policies. The policies need to have consequences that will be enforced equally. And in another part, she says that administrators does not follow up on enforcement, review data, or remind teachers of the policy and procedures in order to norm it. Teachers feel anger toward administrators for not enforcing the policy, seemingly because of their reluctance to make students or parents upset or have an undesirable record of referrals. So it sounds like it's just going to be really the haves and the have-nots, and some people are going to have the experience of phone-free classroom in school, and others aren't. And I just don't think that's fair. And certainly not good for our students. Like you say, it's for our kids, right? So, yeah.
I want to continue further discussion, but before we continue discussion, I think we should officially put it on the table. So, for the proposed amendment, which is off and away all day, do I have a motion and a second to consider this proposed amendment?
So moved.
Second.
You're going to fight rock, paper, scissors? Should we do that?
Patty got it.
Can I ask,
Okay.
this is a very quick procedural question. I think this is right, but it's a first reading, so we don't have a motion to put the policy on the table, but we can still amend it.
Yes, you will, if the board chooses you want to amend the policy to be posted for 21 days, it's, you're voting.
It's different than a resolution.
It's better to do it now than.
Oh, I want to do it now. I wasn't sure if we needed to put the policy on the table first, but we don't. So.
I think I just put it on the table because what I just said was like the introduction of what would normally be our first reading.
Okay, great. So I have Director DePass motions and Director Sullivan seconds. All right, now we go ahead and continue discussion.
Yeah, I'm a member of the policy committee that would have wanted to refer to the full board the off and away all day policy, and I could have been stronger in my advocacy for that. But since then, I've had an opportunity to visit Benson and walk around where they have an off and away during class period policy, and we counted about, 25 or 30 phones. What was really compelling were the observation of a group of Black students standing around after the bell rang. In fact, they were supposed to be in class but were instead checking their phones. At the same time, hearing that at Grant High School, where they have an off and away locked all day policy, the students are showing up to class and are getting 10 additional minutes per period of instructional time. And so to me, that's where the disparity comes in. where we've got these very strong off and away policies at Grant and Lincoln, and we don't have them in places where the students need the guidance of having a off and away all day environment. So I feel like we're doing the students a disservice if we don't put an off and away all day. And I struggled with this personally because I thought, having it at lunchtime cell phone would be helpful, it would be safe. It's also when bullying happens, fights happen, drug deals happen, according to the campus safety, and the behavior that we don't want to encourage in our schools happens because that's when you have access to meet me at room 118. And so I'm going to be really happy to support the amended policy when the time comes.
118 was my room.
So,
Director Scott? Director Scott and then Director Hollins.
Okay, first. Okay. I think I'm going to support the amendment, and it's going to do for two reasons. One, I think the arguments around the simplicity of enforcement are pretty compelling to me. And I will tell you the anecdotal stories I get are that enforcement varies a lot, right? And I know we've all heard those same stories. I know at Ida B. Wells, it started off pretty strict this year. It has gotten easier and easier. The kids know which teachers are strict about phones, and their phones are away, and they know which teachers are not, and their phones are out. And I think I think that when you allow in passing periods and when you allow in lunchtime, you just increase the odds of that inconsistency. I do want to point out, and I've been saying this all along, having a consistent district-wide policy is not going to make enforcement any easier on administrators or teachers. And it's one of the things that I know I've talked to some teachers and we've heard this cry for help to say like we can't be spending all our time doing this. But there's no one else who can enforce these policies except the people in the classrooms with our kids. And so, it's still going to be a real challenge for them. But I hope that a consistency makes it easy. I know I have heard, there's some question of can we enforce this when kids are off campus for lunch? No, but I would also say we have lots of policies that affect our kids off campus that we still enforce when we hear about things. Drug and alcohol policy, violence, bullying, all those things apply to our children even when they're not in schools. It's not that we're chasing them or tailing them around, to make sure they're not drinking on a Friday night. But when we get credible reports of a party and drinking on a Friday night, we actually do punish those kids under our discipline scenarios. And so, I think that again, we don't need to be chasing our kids through, down to McDonald's. But I do think having this policy consistent. The second reason, I hope this doesn't blow the whole thing up, but as I'm reading through the policy, the other reason I'm going to support this is from the very beginning, I think I expressed, I would have loved to see this policy be like 3 lines, right? That said, the board believes that student cell phone use should be limited and directs the superintendent to develop a policy that accomplishes that. That said, I actually do think we've gotten a relatively simple policy, and when I read through it, there's not a lot of extraneous operational stuff, except in the high school section there really is. And what I like about the amendment is it sort of gets rid of all this talk about it. It's, whether it's in your backpack or these other places, and it just says off and away all day, so it can't disrupt students or learning environment unless otherwise permitted under this policy or the related administrative directive. And I'm not sure if this is the intent or not, but what I like about this, my reading of this policy is that if the superintendent decides to allow cell phone use during lunch, that is allowed under this policy. Now, we're expressing a pretty strong, assuming this passes, the board would be expressing a pretty strong desire not to do that. What I like about the flexibility, though, is that if that's just not working, and there's other reasons why it's not working, this is exactly what the superintendent should be able to do, is make amendments to the policy to make it work. Now, I would expect she would report back to future boards to say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm changing the administrative directive, but I like the fact that with the amendment, the policy allows that flexibility, which is where I believe it belongs, because this is an operational issue in the end.
So just want to make sure that that's, was that your intent, that the superintendent would have in the administrative directive?
Director Hollins, is it okay if I answer that really quick?
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
Yes and no. The intent is that it needs some flexibility so that because as you know, some schools have come to one solution, which is pouches. But we also know is that this is a big growing market, and there's a lot of smart people out there, and they may come up with smarter, better ways to do things. 2 or 3 years down the line, there may be a better new system, and it needs to have built-in flexibility. So if there's a better way to do it, we can adapt that without having to go through an entire policy procedure and just affix one line, like for example. So
you're not
there's two
agreeing with
intents.
his interpretation that the superintendent, if she felt that from an operational standpoint wanted to change it, that she could do it?
This is a trusting of the superintendent, because in the policy it says so the device cannot disrupt students or the learning environment. So if there's a way to do it so that it does not disrupt the students or the learning environment, both mentally learning and also other people, then I don't see why not.
Because lunchtime you're not actually in class.
Yeah, and just adding on to this, as a board member who is a student at a school, I think we're strongly not in support of this. Obviously, my test scores aren't going up in lunch. My math class is not helping me when I'm eating food. And I think we need to, as I said in my student rep report, we need to start listening to students. We went into the survey, we told them one of the things that we weren't going to allow was to have students have their phones during the classroom time, and we gave them other options to share their perspective on. And one of the things we heard very clearly from our students is to allow students to have their phones during lunch. I think part of high school and just, the schooling experience is preparing our students for the future, for their career. And when they go out in the future, they're going to be having their phones. So I think us as a school district should work to prepare our students for the future.
Absolutely, I love that. I'm always going to advocate for our kids, and when we talk about kids or young adults making decisions, these are some of the times that we want to include them in the decision-making process, because when this affects them, they're not like 8 or 9 years old. These are folks who are taking IB courses, AB courses, so they're not in a position to where they can't self-regulate. And I think if we are trying to self-regulate students that are heading off to college and, going on to be young adults, I think we do them a disservice. One of the things that I've seen across the country is I've been going to these conferences and looking at these schools. One of the main things that I've seen is the standard of excellence, or the excellence of, or the standards that the school has, right? I was talking to a teacher in Atlanta, and they were talking about the cell phone policy pieces, and he said, well, talk to the kids. What he said is, the kids said, oh, well, doctor, I'm just say a name, Teacher Johnson, don't play that. He has a standard in his classroom, and they was like, yeah, we don't bring our phones in. What he said is that there's no way that a board can manage his classroom better than he can manage his classroom. And if we're trying to manage a classroom, I think that, for me, gets us more into management pieces versus having that culture in those school buildings. I went to another school. None of the kids had their phones out during class. They had it out during lunch. When lunch was over, they went to class. It was as simple as that. So I think while we are trying to prepare our young adults for the real world, we have to treat them like that as well. Because they're heading into a world that is a digital world, and we want to get them this analog prescription for a digital answer. And it's not, I don't think it helps them at all. I love what Director Sullivan was saying, is we have to be able to teach them how to be responsible, teach them consequences. If they have their phone out during classroom, the teacher takes it, he takes it off, as the parent or guardian has to come get it. Sometimes he forgets to take it. They got to wait a couple extra days to get their phone back. That has stopped the kids, by example, from having their phones on in class. I haven't seen, and I read the data that you sent from the UK, they have totally different standards. They have totally different quality of education standards that they have that we don't have here. But I haven't seen any data that showed when the kids have their phones off or on during lunch affects their academic performance. I haven't seen any of that as far as having it off during lunchtime. And so, for me, I think, having the kids have their phones during lunch, I think that's a reasonable expectation. I think the schools, the teachers, once like Director Scott says, they have to enforce the stuff. Whether we say it's off and away right now, there's still going to be those same teachers who is not going to fight or argue with the kids. There's still going to be those same teachers who are doing. How do they enforce that? Teachers have to enforce the stuff. If they don't do that, then it's going to be no different. We just have a policy, but the kids still manipulate those teachers that are not willing to do the enforcement piece as well. Or we spend $700 and some $1,000 getting everybody yonder pouches. Once again, in a budget deficit time we're in, what is the trade-off? Because we don't have enough in our board budget for $780,000. So where is that trade-off if we're going to make it equitable for everyone? If Grant has yonder pouches, Roosevelt needs yonder pouches. Benson has yonder pouches, Lincoln needs with yonder pouches. So, and again, where did that money come from? And if that money has to come from our kids, then is the time for lunch, of them having for lunch, worth it?
I just want to reiterate that we hear from building administrators that the kind of honor system is not working. And I've observed that it wasn't working just in the passing times in the hallways at Benson High School.
I've been to those same schools. I've been to Grant. I've been to Lincoln. I've been to Benson. I didn't see what you see. I didn't see a bunch of black kids watching or sitting around on their phones just doing other stuff. I didn't see that. Maybe that was your experience.
Kind of look surprised, and I should say students. And anyway, we hear from the administrators whether I saw it or not that's not effective. The current system isn't effective. It's not working for students.
Why aren't the administrators then enforcing their policy? I mean, this is the
they are enforcing the current
if
policy.
they're watching students in the hallway with their phones, it is like they.
Because we're just saying 50 times a day, while there are 50 times in the 1.5 hours I was there, would be saying, you need to put your phone away, you need to put your phone, And they were pointing out to me as a board member what they've observed on a daily basis.
And what I think
and sharing that it was not the current policy, started out strong in the beginning of the school year and is failing at this point in the school year.
So what is the difference if we say off and away all day? What's going to be the difference from what we say today to that school tomorrow? What's going to be the difference? They're still going to have the same issues.
The students at Grant are getting an additional 10 minutes per period of instructional time.
Maybe I didn't make maybe I asked the right question. Let me try to see if I can reframe the question. If we say off and away all day, what is going to make those black kids that you pointed out at Benson not do the same, not repeat the same behavior?
If I can answer that. So having a uniform rule across the entire, all the schools, we can learn from each other from mistakes. We also can implement, and again, this is not a solution, this is a start, right? By having a uniform policy, now we know where to start and how to do it. It is a culture change. When you reference those schools in Atlanta that you went to, and something gave them help to get there. We need that help to get there. And this policy is not a fix, it's a start. And what that start means is that the current system is not working. The other thing I also hear,
we've only had the current system for 6 months.
Wait, let me finish. The studies you're referencing about, should we do it during lunch? They're in the compilation of articles and studies I sent you embedded in the articles. The reason I chose those articles specifically is because they link specifically to studies that show the differences between off and away all day versus the schools that had exceptions.
Yeah, but you're talking about in the UK.
No, in the whole U.S. There's one from Middleton, Connecticut.
That was actually middle school.
Middle school.
Just saying.
But anyways,
and I think that's great for middle schools to have off and away. Absolutely.
The other thing is also, we're now starting to hear from students from Grant and Cleveland, and I've heard this multiple times where students are now reporting back. They're saying they're actually enjoying school again.
And I'm hearing from students that said they would want their phones during lunch to connect with their peers.
And to answer your digital literacy component as well, right now our technology, you can do everything that you need to do on a Chromebook that you can do on your phone. The difference is that Chromebook can be controlled, and what is on there can be controlled. You can limit social media and things like that. And as we know, social media has been evolving for the last few decades to become more and more addictive to try to draw in people, because the more screen time that kids are on their phones, the more money they make.
So that should be even.
And
So that should be
we're
even more
talking about
reason
a
why.
battle.
But that should be more reason why we try to teach these kids how to use the stuff responsibly.
Gary, we're not going to be teaching them at lunch. That's not going to be happening.
Yeah, but
I guess let me put the question back at you. Why do you want them to have their phones at lunch?
I'll speak to that. Because I think there's a diversity of thought. And I'm going to speak as a parent, but I also, in fairness to JJ, there's one student at the dais and there's 7 adult board members. And so I think there are some compelling reasons, is that we're really absolutely clear, and I think that the policy makes this clear, and there is no phones during class time. And at lunchtime, there's a whole host of things that students use their phone for. If they leave campus, if there's lockouts, if they have to check in with their parents about picking up their siblings, if they, their game got canceled after school and they're going somewhere else, if they, my daughter was at Cleveland where there was a lockout when she was on Powell, and her calling like, I'm locked out of the school because there's a shooter at Cleveland. I think there's all sorts of reasons, and frankly, we can't control everything. I think we should focus on what are the things where is it most important? And I think there was absolutely uniformity on this board. Even the students said, class time, that's where the distraction from our learning is happening. I also would say, I did actually go home last night and did my homework and read the studies. And I didn't see what you saw in the research. I'm just take the first study of the compilation that you gave us was in the UK, and they were looking for the presence in classrooms for phones. So it wasn't. We're talking about the lunchtime piece. We've already agreed that classroom. So this study where we're citing changes in student achievement is about phones and using them in the classroom. Second, their methodology was the difference in differences estimation strategy. So they just looked at data. In fact, they even say in here that they did not know whether students actually had phones or not. They're just looking at data, and then they made an estimation of here's how many students we think have phones. And then if you banned them in the classroom, not lunchtime, but if you banned them in the classrooms, here's what we saw in these four schools. But it wasn't about banning them during lunchtime or not. And then I looked at the other studies as well, and a lot of them were either middle school, which we've already said, no phones, or they were very specifically focused on, should we ban, is there a difference in learning if there's phones allowed in the classroom or not? And I think that's when you saw some data that showed that. But I didn't see data that was overwhelming or compelling that said students having their phones at lunchtime had an impact on their learning. So that would just be another reason. I would also say, I feel like we should respect student voice. Students also said they wanted their phones during passing time, and they said their preference would be that, in some ways, that often their definition of often away. And there were a lot of things that we just said, no, we're not doing that. And to me, this is one thing that the students said was important. Again, I think they should be able to do whatever they want to do at lunchtime, frankly, as long as it's not against the law. Because it's their time to unwind and get food and do whatever they want to do. Also, I think what I heard the principals say at the very beginning, and I think we have to say what we all heard, not what we heard maybe individually and then have, are we representing? What we heard is they want a district-wide policy. They didn't say specific, I didn't hear them say, and it has to include lunchtime. I think they said, We don't want there to be a different policy classroom by classroom or school by school. We want to have a district-wide policy, and I think this sets the framework of a district-wide policy. I have not heard every principal saying, in fact, I've heard some principals, told me privately, like, we think if kids are going off campus, that like actually it makes them safer to have fun with them. So I think we should not be representing what the principals say besides what they sat there and told us, which was implement a district-wide policy and give us the supports. And we need to be consistent. That's what I heard them say. So from my perspective, I think we should look at this as a reasonable balance. I think it's going to be a huge adjustment to students not having. When I looked at the student data that Dr. Adams put together, the policy as it was presented will be a very big shift, and it is going to require teachers and principals and district staff to provide support. But I don't think telling students they can't use their phone during lunch is an unreasonable thing. I'd also like to know kind of what the superintendent thinks. So I'm going to go back to Director Scott's because I think there's some confusion of what the operational, if the superintendent has the flexibility, I might have a different point of view.
So I'm going to answer the question as well. So
I was actually going to ask if we could call the question pretty soon because we've been talking about this a long time.
Okay.
But hearing from the superintendent is fine.
Okay, so I will also want to hear from John Franco as well, because I know he talked with the students, the principals and stuff as well. But one of the reasons why I'm advocating for our students is when you have student buy-in, things tend to roll out smoother versus it seems like a punitive move to where now you're going to have kids rebel, right? And then it's going to get harder it could be potentially be harder to enforce those things, especially if you don't have really good enforcements on the ground. When you have kids buy in, they buy into it, and it's easier to transition. It's easier to keep them accountable themselves when you have their buy-in. If you're doing, and this is my thing, if you're doing something that's punitive or that seems punitive, you're going to have rebellion, and then it might be even harder to get the results that we're looking for.
But we don't have buy-in on the passing period, as Director Berman was pointed out. So, the student voice is important.
I'm just talking about lunch.
No, I know, but I'm saying, the student voice is important. I want to be really clear, but respecting student voice doesn't necessarily mean agreeing with student voice. So, JJ, I'm very glad you've brought these points forward, but we're already disagreeing with the students on passing period. So, disagreeing with students on passing period and lunch, it's still 7 adults. Either one is disagreeing.
They still hold out lunches.
But with passing period, you're talking about 2 or 3 minutes. Lunch, you're talking about a 30-minute span. So I'm tripping. I don't care about the passing period. I'm just thinking about the lunch period. So that's just my thoughts. Like
For the sake of time, Dr. Franco, and then we're just going to call it. Okay? Then superintendent.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question, and I don't know if I've had a chance to publicly share on this. And much in education and leadership and all of the things that we try and do as a school system is to make sure that we're providing the support for our building administrators who take care of our teachers, take care of our staff, and take care of our students. So I think I would say that my opinion, my thoughts would be to align with what would be the majority from building leadership. And so I was actually going to call John Franco as well to represent what he's hearing from the field, because I do think that it's critical that we hear from the field, and I haven't been in all the conversations. So.
Yes, thank you. Just real quickly, want to touch on the piece around enforcement at lunch. So, and I've talked to 8 out of 9 comprehensives just today around this specific question about lunchtime and enforcement. And so what they're saying is that without the supportive resource specifically around the Yonder pouch, they were adamant that any enforcement at lunchtime without that support is going to be nearly impossible. So regardless of the philosophical pieces, and I love that conversation, that just the enforcement piece, if you say off and away all day, we can supply resources for the classroom specifically, right? Check-in, phone, those types of things. But the reality, without the support of, say, a Yonder Pouch, which Director Collins talked about, is very expensive. It's going to be really difficult for our folks to do. And what we don't want to have is we employ a policy and we can't enforce it, right? Because then we lose it. We lose the credibility. And so, and that includes, like, the only comprehensive principal I didn't talk to today was Katie.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
The only comprehensive principal I wasn't able to talk to today was Katie Parman over at Roosevelt.
Great, thank you.
Just a really quick question about enforcement, though. I mean, we have a ton of rules that we enforce on kids, day in, day out. We're not watching them the whole time. Sure. They're breaking the rules sometimes, right? I mean, I guess why are we treating, what is different about cell phones versus bullying, harassment, swearing, fighting? I mean, all those things are things that kids do. They do occasionally and don't get caught, and they do occasionally and they do get caught. Why is a cell phone policy different?
I think it's different because it's extremely accessible everywhere. That's what kids do. Like, they have their phones, they're on it. But I will say, like, the classroom, we absolutely can do that piece. No question about it. And the other piece is, like, we absolutely hold people accountable in regards to bullying, harassment, and we continue to do that. I just think the accessibility for phones is just different, right? Everybody has it, and it's just consistently.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is it actually sounds to me like we're sort of imposing our own biases about our cell phones onto this, right? That we are also addicted, that we're sort of like we couldn't possibly break that addiction cycle. And honestly, I don't know. We talked early on about what the purpose of this policy is, and the primary purpose for me is academic achievement, which is about classrooms, which is what the original policy does. But there is a secondary, around just addiction generally and about mental health. And I think, we have heard lots and lots of stories about those schools that have successfully banned it, that all of a sudden kids are talking to one another at lunch, right? All of a sudden the social engagement's better. All of a sudden the bullying is down. Now, are those academic studies? I don't know. But I think to ignore some of those anecdotal experiences that people are having just because we're worried about enforcement, I don't know, feels a little bit short-sighted.
So I would encourage you, if you haven't, I agree. I mean, you've obviously been to Wells. You talked to Aisha. They have a distinct cell phone policy specifically aligned to classrooms. And then if you go to lunches, like, is where they're having, I would say, the most issues. And they've done a ton of work around this. They've done a ton of education. And she would even invite all of you to attend. And she told me today that it would absolutely help if we had Yonder Pouches, no question about it. So they're making pieces work around that. I'm just saying it's more difficult at lunchtime. You would go around, she would say, in classrooms, you wouldn't see anything. But lunchtime we know would be inherently different.
May I ask which of our high schools have Yonder Pouches, and are they our higher
Cleveland
schools?
and Grant. And so and of course they're all exploring. I think that Benson is one that want to explore it. I think you get Franklin is one that would want to explore it. So it is that piece, right, about all day. And in order to make it work collectively, say you didn't have a Yonder Pouch, there has to be immense buy-in collectively, and there are pieces that we would expect, classroom teachers would have to go ahead and do. Like, that's the only way to make it work without something like a Yonder Pouch.
Yeah, and then just thank you. I really appreciate your input. Just kind of rephrase on that, I want to push this up for a vote. Half my high school memories were from lunch. All the stupid crap that happened during lunch and the weird things and banter and stuff like that. When I was starting teaching, lunch was like the liveliest place where students are getting to know each other, doing all these random things. And then smartphones happened, and then lunch is just a dead scene. People are not making memories from lunch anymore. And I just want to rephrase that. What we're trying to do here, the reason I propose this amendment is trying to change the culture. We're trying to give back time to our students. We're trying to give that socialization back to our students to try something. And again, it's a policy. If it doesn't work, we have that administrative directive that can figure out things that do work. And so, yes, so with that.
We're also asking our kids to do something that we ourselves don't do.
We didn't hurry up. Yeah, can you be quick?
And I would say I'm generally shocked of hearing that students are making memories. When I go into cafeterias, when I hear from our district student council who represents the bodies of their schools, we hear laughter. Students are playing card games. Students are having clubs during lunch. So I don't know where that ideology of students are not creating memories during lunch is coming from. As someone who's out of school every day and as a board member who may have visited a school once or twice, I don't know how you could come up with that ideology with just a small portion of visiting.
Yeah, you may be right, but again, what's driving here is student achievement, and the success and the data is showing that the districts, the schools that have done an all day seem to be working, and the policy as it is before the amendment is repeating what most schools already have, or very similar.
I'm gonna just go back and say, you haven't provided any data that talked about achievement going, whether they have phones during lunch and off during class at all. There's no data for that.
Especially the UK one, it's not helping.
So, I know the lawyer wants to talk, and so I generally want to make sure that I did want to have something to say, but I think I have to wait until the lawyer talks, because the lawyer may make me stop talking.
No, sir, I'd never do that. Chair Wong, I just want to call, before you vote on the amendment, that there probably needs to be clarity about what the board intends about deferring to the administrative directive. There's been ambiguity about what discretion you're delegating to the superintendent, and so you want to be sure that that's articulated. I believe what you all are saying is that Superintendent Armstrong would have the ability to make a variation from off and away all day within an administrative directive. And I know Director Scott spoke about communicating to the board. I just want to articulate that clearly because it wasn't clear across all of you speaking.
Yeah. At the same time, I also want to question that as well, because where it says otherwise permitted under this policy or related administrative directive, that part wasn't edited from the original version. So is that necessary to do?
I was going to say the same comment. I mean, that even if we don't amend this policy, for middle and elementary schools, the superintendent would have discretion to allow cell phones into middle and elementary schools under administrative directive.
Yes, what I heard was a different interpretation, so I want to be clear with the amendment that everybody's clear that the amendment would include ability for, under the administrative directive, for the superintendent to vary from off and away all day or middle school, either way.
Director Scott, you said that was somewhat determinative that the superintendent would have the flexibility. And it might be determinative for me too, if that's the flexibility that the superintendent decided from an operational standpoint to change it, then I might have a very different opinion.
I mean, it seems pretty clear language to me. I mean, I guess maybe I would also ask you, Director, even before the amendment, did you intend for the superintendent to have administrative flexibility around middle and elementary schools, but not around high schools? No, I'm asking Director Bill Edwards.
Oh,
sorry, the original policy, right? So even without the amendment, as it's written, the superintendent would have discretion for middle and elementary schools to allow cell phones in certain cases or lunch or whatever, but would not have that discretion in high schools. Was that the intent?
The intention of adding that was to give, again, going for simplicity, to give the superintendent the flexibility from an operational basis to make adjustments.
Across the board or just middle and elementary school? I'm sorry. Across the board, meaning elementary school, middle school, and high schools, or just in elementary and middle schools? I think all we have to do is get clear on that, and then we can move on with our conversation.
So the reality is that there was an initial oversight in the policy, so we developed it pretty far along, and all of a sudden I realized we hadn't talked about kindergarten through 8th grade. So that got added later, so it was more of an editing, but I would say for both.
So it's across the board, elementary school, middle school, and high school.
And I would add, there is, as I'm looking, and I missed it, but in the crosstown language for high school, there is a phrase around unless otherwise permitted under this policy or the related administrative directive. So,
all right, so across the board. All right, so because I didn't get to talk, and so everybody else talks, so I won't talk. I wouldn't vote for it at lunchtime. I think that we're asking our students to do something that the educators in the building aren't going to be doing. The administrators in that building aren't going to be doing it. You asked the question of why would I want them to or why would we want them to have it during lunch? I would say probably for the same reason that you look at your phone during lunch, to see what's going on, to check up on what you missed, to get caught up before you have to go back to work. I mean, if we're teaching our kids to be responsible, then let's teach them to be responsible. I was also going to add the information that, you know, that they have already shared about the data does not specifically call out from the articles that we have received, does not specifically call out that lunchtime is an issue. It just, you know, it says that there's a difference. So I want us to be very clear on that. I would also I would caution us, I would say that, maybe that's a better word. I would caution us on the language that we're using when we're speaking about this and we're talking about the different schools. I would caution us, because when we start making statements like, I was at a school, talking to you, Director DePass, that we were at this school and I saw a bunch of black kids in the hall. The moment you start saying, I saw a bunch of black kids in the hall, are you insinuating that white kids doesn't, please. And so I would caution us, because although I don't think that's our intention, when we start looking at 15-second sound bites, that what's going to come across, it's going to appear ugly. And I don't want us to get into the place where we're this district that's looking at our students from a deficit mindset, talking about our students are committing crimes and they're doing this, and all this can stop if we just take away the cell phone. I believe we have one of the things that has come out clearly here tonight is we're trying to solve a management issue with this policy, because we already have stuff. Schools can already say that we don't want phones, or we don't want that, and for management purposes, either they have the must, you know, I want to enforce it, or I don't want to enforce it. I don't feel that I can. That's a school management issue. That's something that I believe that the administrators of the building need to say that this is what we do here, and then if they don't like it, tell the moms to come in, or tell the guardians to come in, or tell the parents to come in. But this is our policy. I think we need to have that same type of policy with a lot of stuff, clothing included. Like, you know, I'm across the board. I don't want to see spaghetti straps, but if we're not going to do it, then we're not going to do it. I was thinking that, but I want us to be very careful right now in our wording and our terminology. I also want to make sure that everybody got on me a while back, and I have no problem putting myself out there. I am that guy. I say harsh stuff, but I don't say it unless I mean it. And it just is what it is. And not everybody agrees with me all the time, but I am not even going to make a statement unless I believe in it. And a while ago, I made a statement, and you know, everybody went crazy with, oh, you said you don't care about what the students say, and you know, folks was getting on my head. Everybody was on me because I said, when it comes to safety and security, I want the students to be around long enough to be mad that I made a decision, and that we can talk about it. And they got all upset with me. Everybody did, because I was like, the frontal lobe ain't even developed. Y'all know how I do. I'm out there. I say this stuff. I just put it all out there. But again, I am not going to say nothing that I don't believe in. In this moment, we need to decide as a board. You either want their opinion or you don't. You can't tell them, give me your opinion and tell me what you think and tell me what you want, and then say, thanks for playing, but I'm going to do what I want to do because I'm the adult in the room and it's my job to make sure. You got to say that kind of stuff from the beginning. See, I say it from the beginning. I say it right off the top, you know what I'm saying, right out the rip. If I don't want it, then I'm going to tell you, this is a decision that I have to make. My kids can't eat candy all day long. They can't walk around and just have chocolate for breakfast and chocolate for dinner. No, you got to eat a healthy meal. And that's like, but in this regard, this is not one of those spaces where I don't feel like we should not be listening to the students, because if we're going to be teaching them to be mindful, if we're going to be teaching them to be responsible, if we're going to be teaching them that, you know, they got to be accountable, and we're saying, okay, we all agree that the class time is out of the way, you know, it's done, it's over, this is no longer up for discussion. And we even said that you don't even get to vote on that. It's like, this is out. And they even agreed with that. And then we say, okay, now where can it work? And then they say, well, we want it at lunch. And then we say, okay, thanks for playing. Yeah, but we never wanted you to have it at lunch. And I think that's where I think we failed them, because we lied. We lied. Just point blank, it is what it is. We knew in the beginning we wanted it away all day. But this was a process that we had to go through so that we could say that we talked to them. And if we lied. And so I think that that's where we did them the disservice. And so, again, I'm not for it. I think they need to have it at lunch. I think that the administrators in the buildings and the educators in the classroom, that they have to be stern, and we have to write a policy that gives them the ability to be stern and hold fast and true to that. But when it comes down to being at lunch, they need their phones the same reason I want mine, because I want to check up on what's going on. I want to see what my kids did, the same reason that you go use your phone. So if we go ask them to do it, then I dang sure don't want to see a teacher sitting in the classroom on their phone while they at lunch. Because if it's your lunchtime and you can be on your phone, then why can't this student be on it? And so if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And then now I'm done, because I had to talk long because everybody else had spent a long time talking, and it wasn't fair.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I am glad I didn't wear my spaghetti straps today.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that
we're going to call to a vote.
I want to make sure that we have clarity, because we're putting this out for 21 days. So it's my understanding that across both, the superintendent has the authority to vary the policy.
If that is the intent that the board is articulating, then that is what it will be. That it is not 100% clear from what is written here. That's why I appreciate your clarity. We will make sure that the language mirrors all of that. I hear that from several directors.
So do you need us to, do you need to know if there's a majority of people who believe that's the interpretation?
That the amendment includes that understanding. So when you were voting on, if you're going to call the vote for the amendment, I need to be clear whether or not the superintendent has the authority in that vote, please, and then we can fix the language accordingly.
I want to be very clear. So I'm going to read it out loud and stress what it means, right? So it says personal electronic devices must be off and away. So this is the amendment, by the way, where it deleted the high school section. So this is the middle school, elementary, applies to all. And with one added line that I took from the high school section and re-added it back into the elementary section, which is highlighted in blue. So it reads, personal electronic devices must be off and away throughout the school day so that the devices cannot disrupt students or the learning environment, unless otherwise permitted under this policy or the related administrative directive. Now, the original intent about the permitted under this policy was under exceptions, where there are some exceptions that can be accounted for example, IEPs, 405 plans, required educational program like language and things like that that may need smart devices. The other thing is also or relate to the administrative directives. So for example, as long as off and away throughout the school day, and that is the policy, but if we're talking about like off-campus behavior or accessing it off-campus, that would fall under that could be defined by the administrative directive. So like that would be where the scope of the flexibility. Is that, am I missing anything from other policies?
Yeah, that would, I mean, when you look at, for instance, if someone's going off campus, then I look at that as an equity issue, because all kids can't go off campus. So if that means that an administrative directive is almost essentially like we are making this policy, we're making this policy an equitable policy from the start, and I would have a problem with that.
And I think my question is, does majority of the board affect the superintendent's decision?
So what I would suggest so that
it's time to go.
so what I would suggest is just see if there's a majority of the board that, because this will provide clarity, because it may not be it's the majority of the board's interpretation of the language, not just because it's your amendment, but an individual. So the question would be, do you want to restate the question, and then in the form of, do board members agree with this?
Do board members agree that the superintendent has the authority to create an administrative directive regarding cell phones that may vary from off and away all day during the lunch period. That's really the point of clarity that we need for the policy.
So now you just need a yes or no from.
So
Yes, ma'am.
I'll just start. I mean, now I can't remember if it was a yes or no. Yes, I believe the superintendent has that. I would take it one step further, though. I hear we're talking about lunch, but I think it's important 10 years from now or 5 years from now when folks are reading this and different lawyers and different board members, like, it reads to me like the superintendent has the authority to make administrative directive changes, whether it's around lunch, whether it's around, off and away during passing time, whether it's around other things.
Right. It's including that.
Yes, and actually that is important to me, and I'll just be really clear, Chair Wong, actually your view of the flexibility was a little too narrow for me. And so just
I'm fine.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yes. And I just want to say, I read it strictly, but personally, I do believe that it should be more flexibility for the superintendent.
Thank you. I will be quiet now because we have the clarity we need to articulate your directive. So
Now we can move to vote, and then eventually go to bed. Okay? All right, so we will now vote on, how do I say this? The cell phone policy as amended. All those in favor, please indicate by saying.
Actually, we're just voting on the amendment. We don't vote on the policy.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So we are voting to amend the policy. All those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
Student Representative Conceivy?
A strong no.
Thank you. The amendment has passed by a vote of 4-3 with Student Representative Conceivy voting a strong no. I turned it off. All right, so we will now move to the behind schedule. Oregon School Board Association recommendations and elections. So the Oregon School Board Association is organized as one general state association with up to 24 regionally elected representatives established across 14 geographic regions to support member participation and representation. In even number years, board members vote to elect regional representatives for odd number positions on the OSBA Board of Directors. Member boards also vote on resolutions submitted to the membership. This year we are voting on 3 resolutions and for positions 17 and 19 on the OSBA Board of Directors. Legislative priorities and principles. We'll start with the resolution. Yeah.
Can I make a motion to just group these and do all the resolutions around OSBA together?
Yes, let's do that.
So I think
that
it's
sarcastic?
I think it's 7008 through 7012.
Yes, so we will now be, do I have a motion to, and a second to adopt resolution 7008 to 7012?
Yes.
Thank you. We have, we have Director Green moves and Director Scott seconds. Any board discussion? Ms. Bradshaw, any public comment?
No.
Great. We will now vote on resolution 7008 to 7012. Resolution to support all the above. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed by indicate by saying no. Abstentions? Student Representative Conceivy, indicate your vote.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 7008 to 7012 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Conceivy unofficially voting yes. What? Yeah, I know. See, that's why we did that. Smart. All right, next up we have
consent agenda.
The consent agenda. The board will now vote on the consent agenda, board members. If there's any items you would like to pull for a later meeting, those will be set aside, or we will vote to decide if it gets set aside. Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
Director Hollins moves and Director Green, was that right? Seconds the adoption of the consent agenda. Any board discussion?
I just have one item. This is probably gonna just need to be recorded by somebody to ask, Dan Young, but we have a bunch of, this may be for Ms. Powell. We have a number of, contracts on tonight's agenda that are these ones where, people get on a rotating list of contracts, and, it's where we have a fair number of minority and women-owned, businesses, but it's not clear whether we actually use them. And we talked at one point in time of getting an understanding of if we're actually using them or we're just voting for contracts that make it seem like we are, but they don't actually get utilized. And we have some more of those tonight, so I'll circle back with Roseanne about that.
Yeah, that's great. And the city of Portland has a similar method where they have a rotating list of contractors, but so the issues come up, whether they're actually being used or not, is a really great message.
We're a year in, just seems like now's the time to see whether we utilize them.
All right, the board will now vote on resolutions 7013 through 7018. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes, all opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Director Consavi, please indicate your vote.
Yes.
No abstentions. So the consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Consavi voting yes. Next up, we have the next 5 minutes for other business and committee referrals. I do have one thing I just want to kind of quickly bring up discussion is about the appointment to Zone 1 position. Just for full transparency, I'm just kind of going to update of what I heard, and then maybe if you're comfortable enough, kind of share if you've had any interaction, just so that we can all be clear about who's done who. I just want to be very clear, before we decided on this process, one person did reach out to me, and I did meet with that one person. I had another person reach out who saw the board meeting, was wondering if they could ask for information, and I did email back saying it is okay to ask board members for information, like, for example, what's it like to serve as a board member, or what are things that you need to do, or what are things to consider, but it may not be okay to have a meeting to promote or to promote oneself, right? And that needs to be discussed as a board. But again, there's no rules. We're not setting any rules here. I'm just asking everyone, or we are asking everyone, just to use your best judgment. And then again, a little space. Is there anybody else who wants to, for full transparency, share if there's any details or anything that has happened?
Yeah, I've met with a candidate or somebody who was interested before we started our process. I also mentioned at the last meeting that many of the applicants are also going to potentially be candidates, and I think it would be sort of malpractice for somebody to get into a race without talking to board members, whether current or former, about what that's like. Because I separate that a little bit differently from like lobbying for the, which would be different, lobbying for the position versus I'm thinking about filing for the seat, like election filing, and what is it like? What am I getting myself into? I mean, those types of questions, which is very, to me, is very different than like I want to meet with you to like lobby you on my candidacy.
Thank you. I think we both are in agreement, and that's exactly what I replied to my email to one candidate. Can I just ask, maybe with all the board members, is it okay for people to come up to you and ask you for information, like what's it like to be a board member, what are things that are expected from you, things like that?
Absolutely.
Great. In terms of like lobbying themselves to you and stuff like that, I think I'm just going to say use your best judgment. Anything else? That's all I want to say about that.
And if you're wearing spaghetti straps, don't call me.
So is the information all out there now for people?
The application should be available online.
Online through
Okay.
PDS.
And also, has it gone to the schools that we talked about in Zone 1? It has PTAs and the school administrators. Okay, thank you.
Great. Is there any other business in committee referrals? All right. With that, we are adjourned. Go home.